Get to the High Council here on World Class Bullshitters. I'm your host, Jeff Hicks, and with me tonight is my co-host, all the way from the Rippaverse. You know him, you love him. Say hello to Andy Andrew.
What is going on, Jeff? What is going on, chat? What's going on, script? We're going to have a blast of a time tonight. Hail to the chat and hail to the High Council. I have a feeling tonight's going to be filled with some chuckles, we'll say. Some chortles, if you will.
And some Duncan. So, folks,
And
if you're a basketball fan, this is the episode for you. Now, our other
coffee
for the evening. You know him from the Great White North. Say hello to the Script Doctor.
Hey, everybody. So happy to be here. We've got some very fascinating topics to discuss tonight. And a nice little I told you so. Not necessarily from me, but actually from the state of TV itself. I won't be able to share it, unfortunately, but I can read it out to you. But it's quite fascinating. But we'll get to that once we get to the main topic.
I'm excited. Now, folks, we did not have a show last week, so thank you very much for everyone who was like, "Oh, are you okay?" I was exhausted, but the week's been great. We haven't had any other hiccups, but WCBS is back. It feels weird. It's like I'm trying to act like we were gone for all this time. Yeah, you missed us last week. Well, we're back. Let's have fun tonight. Folks,
we missed you too.
Yes. All the things that we missed. We're going to be talking about one mainly, our good friend, the Acolyte, because it's over forever. It's not like we called it or anything. But we have some other stuff to talk about as well. But, folks, let's hit that thumbs up button. I know the YouTube algorithm is not kind to this show, but we're still here for you guys because you're still here for us. But we need to get these numbers up live for the watch hours. So, folks, share the show when we go live and help us out because we have to delist certain things for algorithm's sake. So, just understand why we do what we do here, folks, just to help us go to 200K. Check out today's videos as well. We had one drop on the Acolyte getting canceled because we had a short last night as soon as that news dropped. So check out our shorts as well because we get to the shorts really quickly these days. We've had some new upgrades around the channel. And if you've noticed, we've had a lot more stuff coming your way. So you might even see tonight's show truncated a little bit. I even have a way to make the podcasts and all the shows like 25 minutes. So if you guys would watch like a super short version of these shows, let me know. They make literally no sense, but they're funny and they're really, really insane. Because it's like the program doesn't know when topics start or stop. So I could be in the sentence talking about the Acolyte. Oh man, isn't it great that Leslie Headland? And then it changes to a talk about, I don't know, chicken nuggets. Isn't it great that Leslie Headland got dipped in barbecue sauce? You're like, what? So it's like a really weird setup, but it's great. So, folks, if you want to hear that, press 1 in the chat. It'd just be fun. Now, folks, let's have some fun right now. Let's check in with you guys. We have some words of the day. Jason Green, I was at the P.O. box, or I was at the post office today taking care of stuff, so be on the lookout for that. So, Georgian says he's been an 18-month member. There you go. I'll get it right. Thank you, Georgian. And also, thank you for being a very generous super chatter this evening. He says, lefties, the Chinese made video games based on a well-known ancient Chinese folktale. It is not diverse and inclusive enough. Also, lefties, willing to use well-known Chinese malware spyware app to grumble about said games. Is that irony?
I would call that in the realm of irony, yeah.
The whole we'll get to this thesis tonight, folks. But what I want to say early, because Georgian, we're going to talk about this. This stuff never works ever. If you could come up with an example of the some of this inclusivity making money, I will listen. But we have watched the most inclusive, the gayest, the most flamboyant Star Wars series ever, and it's dead. Now, we'll get to the real core of it. There are 180 million reasons why the show's really dead. But if the show would have been a hit, people, they would have renewed it. But it's full of crap like this, and people are burned out, Georgian. We only use TikTok, by the way, Georgian, just because it's a necessary evil. But I don't understand how the app works. Do you guys have any secrets for TikTok?
No, I don't use it. I barely end up using Instagram. Most social media presence that I have is almost strictly for work at this point.
Mine is too. If you follow me, because I'm friends with some people in the chat, it's like Yeah, you can hear me talk about my normal life. It's exciting because I'll talk about the book. Like I got a review for Wokebusters in, and it was positive. What did they call it? Delightful, and gave me a bunch of good responses. So, folks, be on the lookout. It is done. It passed its goal. It's closed. It's all that wonderful stuff. You know what game Sir Georgian could be talking about, or is this just an example, like a hypothetical?
He's talking about Black Myth Wukong, which is kind of a fantastical reimagining, and not in the modern reimagining way, but like a reimagining of the Journey to the West Chinese tale. And the game itself is a Souls-like, so it's kind of like Sekiro or Ghost of Tsushima, Dark Souls, that kind of a thing. Like it's meant to be a very difficult game, but combat looks really cool. The visuals are stunning. Like visually, the game is incredibly impressive. But there's a whole discourse around it right now, which would really be going down a rabbit trail and into Wonderland, really, to pick apart all of it, because there's some, we'll say, misinformation on all sides of the issue right now.
You see, man, I don't follow enough of the game controversies. I just don't. I don't, man. I'm not trying to like come up with some excuse why it's not important to talk about it. I buy my games, I play my games. I'm a very different type of gamer. You guys can hear me debate it over on Side Scrollers last week. It was a lot of fun with Mark the Cyborg. I gotta look into this more. Is it interesting, Andrew? Would you say it's at least worth a read?
I mean, at the very least, yeah, I would say so.
Maybe I'll make it into a short.
There you go.
Maybe I'll find out that this is really egregious and I need to get involved, and then I'll become a fan or something. I don't know. I'm always willing to change or expand. Check these things out.
Mm-hmm.
But so Georgian, thank you very much. I'll have to look into this. I know I can just check it out on Twitter. I'll have to look at the side scroller, see if they're talking about it. The word of the day from Shrubbles08, thank you. The word of the day is twant. The twant acolyte, hot tub twant machine, blazing twants, and fistful of twant. Well, let's see.
The twant before Christmas.
The twant before Christmas?
Yeah.
Jingle all the twant.
Twant busters.
Twant in present danger.
That's pretty
Hot
good.
Twants, part 2.
Indiana Jones and the Temple of Twant.
Oh, major twants.
Fear and Loathing in Twant Vegas.
Ooh, that's where I want to go. Folks, join us in Las Vegas next year. It's going to be a blast. Let's see. Twant in the City.
Ooh. That actually really works. That's probably one of the better ones, honestly.
Big Trouble in Little Twant.
Journey to the Center of the Twant.
That's my favorite one.
50 Shades of Twant.
Ooh.
20,000 Leagues Under the Twant.
That's just nasty.
You wrong for that.
Folks,
see no twant, hear no twant.
No twant to die.
The twant, a Star Wars story.
Was it the twant that ate Seattle or whatever that city is?
Little Shop of Twants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Read me, Seymour. Folks, send in your twant titles. We'll be reading those all night long. Xavier to God, early comment on the Acolyte, which we're about to talk about right now. It's a win-win for that shit being canceled. Well, folks, the Acolyte is no more. And now it's time to talk about that. So, last night, around this time, the news broke that the Acolyte would not be returning to Disney Plus for a second season. The show was a fairly big hit in the first episode, but by the last episode, it had fallen off completely. Disastrous numbers. And overall, it is the worst performing Disney Plus series. The show has an exorbitant budget of $180 million, coming in at $22.5 million per episode. if you think about it, like I said in today's video, which you guys got to check out after this stream, hell, pause the stream, go watch it, come right back. What I said though is I gave you 10 movies that had budgets under The Acolyte. All 10 of those films combined cost $78.4 billion or million dollars, excuse me. They brought in $2.4 billion. Those were all better investments than putting money into Star Wars. It lost money again. So here we are. The show is canceled. People are on the internet trying to make excuses. They're trying to say, oh, it's the angry fans. They should have gave the show a chance. Fans should have done this. Fans should have done that. It's not the fans. It's Disney. Fans don't have a say in the budget. Fans don't have a say in the story. Fans only have a say in what they spend their time in doing. So
right, and they give us no reason to give them the benefit of the doubt to want to spend our time with it. Like they've given us zero reason to do that.
There's been a number of failures and declining returns of other Disney Plus Star Wars shows that made no one want to take any interest in the Acolyte, which is very justifiable.
Yeah, this show, we watched it for the show, the live stream. We did all 8 weeks. It got worse. It started out weak. It ended weak. It had so many holes in it. But you have this invisible freedom fighting force who are out there to defend this show like it either is their parent or it's like going to pay their way to school. It's this weird defense that comes out every time a Disney property comes out. Could it be bots? Could it be idiots?
Sure, some of them are.
Yeah, they're all stupid.
You know,
But I digress. My point is, man, everybody and their sister had an excuse for this show, and it didn't work. And now here we are. So I guess that's the whole story of what I'm trying to get out, so everybody has the context, as if they didn't know already. But I'm going to ask you, Script Doctor, first. What did you think of the news that this show, or what did you think when the news broke that the show was canceled?
Well, it's kind of funny because I reported way back in 2020 when COVID was starting to pick up that there was a state of the industry report sent out to everybody in Hollywood, me included. And it came out in March 26 in 2020. And Jeff, I actually screenshot a little bit and sent it to you on your Twitter DM. But I'll be happy to read it to you. And this is the official statement from Disney Plus, which stated, remember, this is March 2020, not officially shutting down buying, but acknowledging that they're far more focused on salvaging their current projects may not be the best time to take projects to them, which means Disney and Disney Plus was not taking external projects being pitched for any of the properties they had. About 6 weeks later, it was announced that Leslie Headland said, screw that, I'm going to go pitch to Kathleen Kennedy my show called The Acolyte. And for some reason, they decided to put it into effect. They actually violated their own rule and press release that they sent out that spring. And now you have $180 million in the hole and a television show that they spent this money to invest in for possibly a number of seasons, and now it's canceled. So they should have listened to themselves back in March 2026 and said, you know what, Leslie, now's not the right time. Come back later. And here they are. They basically, somebody at that company knew the right thing to do. They did it. Leslie violated it, care of also Kathleen Kennedy approving it and thus violating as well. And now they are $180 poorer as a result.
I mean, fluff around and find out, I guess. Like, good.
What a great way to describe it. Sorry.
Seriously, though, I mean, for real, the script just described, they weren't supposed to be taking on new projects. Leslie Headland decided she has a big enough ego and thinks she's big girl on campus and goes to Kathleen Kennedy, who we all know is a nitwit when it comes to this stuff right now. And they decide to do this anyway. So you decide to dump more money, because this was, I think, to date, the most expensive Disney Plus series, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So most expensive Disney Plus series. It had the budget of your typical big blockbuster film. Actually, that's not even true. This was more than a lot of big blockbuster
More than
films.
a tentpole. Yep.
Yeah, not counting a lot of the more recent MCU films, which have had, a number of reshoots and blah, blah, blah. And so their numbers are just, in ridiculously stupid territory, right? But take something like any of the MonsterVerse Godzilla films, right? You take a look at those and those have all made money. The most recent one, its budget was 120. It was one something.
Godzilla X Kong. I think
Yeah.
that was barely across the line of $100 million because that was Legendary and Warner Brothers, right? So,
yeah, and so I know for sure it was into 100, but it was less than the Acolyte.
Here we go. Right here, I got the number for you.
Let's
on
hear it.
Wikipedia, it's between 135 and 150, but it brought in 586.7.
Yeah.
So
wow, that's a lot more than
I saw this movie. I thought it was awesome.
I saw it 3 times in theaters,
and I
then
boxed it.
Bought this beautiful 5-film collector's 4K set, which was the first 4K release that I purchased since the first Wonder Woman film. But the point is, they're dumping all of this money, and not just still putting money into something. They are dumping increasingly higher amounts of money into things that are receiving increasingly fewer viewers, right? It's like each one of these Disney Plus Star Wars series, when it releases and we finally start to get to see, the numbers of whatever viewership we're actually allowed to see, it always ends up, it seems like, being lower than the last one, lower than the last one. This one was even lower than the last one was. And so I don't know how you justify dumping more money into something that is clearly receiving less and less interest, and then combining that with putting out something your audience didn't ask for. Nobody asked for this. Nobody wanted this.
Well, I mean, it's not that they didn't want a prequel to the prequels. It's the fact that Disney clearly stated that they're trying to salvage their current projects, and then instead they put in a new one that does actually the opposite of salvaging Star Wars. It damaged it further.
Yeah. No, it absolutely did.
It's just a lack of communication, a lack of... This would be a good piece of evidence to say one wing of Disney was trying to acknowledge that they had issues and were trying to, stay above water. And another wing said, well, screw that. We're Disney. And this is where we are right now. Or at least this is where Disney is. What's funny is that all the other studios, and I actually have some quotes from other ones there, like Discovery was looking for finished or close to finished feature documentaries, specials, or limited series, and they're still hearing pitches via video conference and phone because they cared about actually taking advantage and staying in business, where Disney was the only studio that said, we are not taking new pitches, ideas, or anything outside to any of the properties we have. And then I remember before it was actually leaked to the trades, I remember the rumor occurring on the screenwriting discords that Leslie Headland and Agents Co. were meeting with Kathleen Kennedy weeks after this public announcement went out saying that Disney's not taking any pitches. And we were just like, well, why are they meeting? They've never met before. They've never crossed paths before. Harvey Weinstein never worked with Kathleen Kennedy before.
But it was enough for Kathleen Kennedy to cry when she heard the pitch.
Apparently so. And then what happens later? Well, now we get a leaked article out in the trade saying, oh yeah, looks like they're going to be, Leslie Headland's new show is going to be picked up. Whoa, what new show? But there's no thing here. And then all of a sudden it basically seemed to be maneuvered to the point, because there is some sort of popularity in it with the trades. Remember, not the audience, the trades. The trades generate this information, this hype for you.
Right.
It ended up putting pressure on Iger and Co. to be like, okay, fine, we'll give it a green light. What could it cost, right?
Famous last words.
And now here we are, 4 years later, $180 million in the hole. And guess what? That $180 million probably is most of what was spent since the time it was put into production back in late 2020. Because again, that's including pre-production, post production itself, post, as far as I can know. And then the other part too is that it's not, well, you can aggregate it out to like, oh yeah, it's about 22 point and change a million per episode. That's not actually what was spent. Some episodes probably cost more money. Like some of the flashback episodes probably cost more money than,
or that episode that had the asteroid chase, the asteroid field chase, which was, I will give them that one thing. Like that was actually, all right, this scene actually looks pretty good. Is this where all the money went?
Well, what's funny is that scene could have been easily just a re-rendered and repurposed version of the other asteroid fight scene that was in space fight scene that was in that was in Ahsoka. Because there's another similar set piece to that. So you never know. They just could have taken those original models and then re-rendered them in another place to save themselves some time. It's all up in the air. What's funny is that because this is the first official Disney thing canceled, I believe Book of Boba Fett is not coming back for any follow-ups either. But they haven't made a formal announcement.
Tamara Morrison actually just made a comment on that recently.
Well, he didn't want to come back anyways. And the other part too is he was arguing that he spoke too much in the show, and Boba Fett's not much of a talker. So it's
it was a combination of
him anyways.
It was a combination of that, and he felt like the character was just kind of done dirty in it. Which I guess people who are legitimate Boba Fett fans probably agree because he was done dirty in his own show. I'm not even a big Boba Fett guy.
He was done dirty by turning him into a clone. But yeah,
I agree with that too.
But yeah, I mean, we're not going to. The question being is like, okay, so they've officially canceled the Acolyte, which means it's got a cliffhanger that it's not going to be followed up with, at least not in the Acolyte. It could be followed up with in another Disney Plus project or another Star Wars project. Heaven forbid. It's now a coin toss. Will Disney?
Dude, you could do a one-off movie about Plagueis and young Sheev.
Could, but will they do a? Will they? It's now up to a coin toss. Will they do what they did to Willow? Will they remove it from canon and write it off because it wasn't a pre-sold project? It was exclusive to Disney Plus. There's no other sale windows they can do. There's no money that they owe, no deals they have to honor. Willow is the purest Disney property, purest Lucasfilm property now because they scrapped and burned and basically memory hold and said that Willow Disney Plus series doesn't exist in canon anymore. We canceled it. We wrote it off for taxes. Never happened, never existed. The original movie is still untouched, unscathed. No problem. Now they could do the same thing with this because it's the first official Star Wars property that has actually been canceled deliberately so, and mere weeks after its last episode debuted.
It's true. Like they were actually really quick. That's an interesting observation. And I think it's quite telling too. They were very quick to announce that that's not happening. Like there have been things in, say, the MCU or in Star Wars that haven't gotten followed up on, we know are not actually coming, but they've waited years in between making any commentary on them, if at all. Whereas this, yeah, to your point, it's been a month, less than a month. Yeah, about a month, right?
Yep.
Since this sucker ended. And they were like
restored because the show is over.
Yeah, and so they're like, all right, well, we're not doing any more of that. So I'm wondering how much of an acknowledgement that was of like, yeah, this was just a genuinely bad idea. Because for them to do that, for them to say it's not coming back like that, it's not a direct acknowledgement, but it is kind of a public acknowledgement. Because if something does well, you don't just shelve it. Right. If something does well for you, you follow up on it. Right. Because you've got momentum. So you keep that going. That's why we wound up getting so many MCU films in such a short period of time initially. And for a while, it worked just fine. So if this show had fantastic viewership and had somehow managed to make them money, that's a whole other matter because they're not really making much in the way of money on these Disney Plus series to begin with. Because they're not getting, kickbacks on it because they're licensing it out to another platform or whatever. So it's all about whatever new subs. So not already existing subs because those people are already there. So you got to measure it on new subs and like ad revenue if you have one of the versions of Disney Plus that has ads. So you're not making much. Like the likelihood of them making 180 million back on any Disney Plus show is nil. But for them to, put out something, people had no interest in it. If people had interest in this and it had in some miraculous manner made them money or at least gotten them views to justify continuing going on with it, they would have done it. It's what they did with Mandalorian, right? Like there were diminishing returns clearly on those seasons after the first one, but they kept going because they thought, okay, we're getting at least something here that it's enough viewership to justify continue going.
And the merchandise sold like crazy.
And the merchandise, right? They're not going to get squat on merchandise for the Acolyte. But this one...
We'll get Ollie's before the year's up.
Oh, I bet.
I bet. Get Ollie's before Labor Day.
That'll be a new lap record, and I will be impressed.
New record! It's like doing time trials in Mario Kart.
God, I haven't played Mario Kart in a long time.
I play Mario Kart every Sunday night at 8 p.m. Central on my Twitch channel. That was not a plug. It's Caffeinated Wolf.
It was good. I don't even know what that last part meant, but okay.
Caffeinated Wolf is the name of my channel.
No, you said, this is not a plug. This is Caffeinated Wolf. I was like, wait, what?
No, I said it's Caffeinated Wolf, but yeah.
Oh, okay.
You're good. I said it like super, super fast. I'm talking at speed. But yeah, like that had to be some sort of a sideways acknowledgement of just how bad this series did for them to mere weeks after it ended, they're saying, yeah, we're not doing this one again.
Yep. 5 weeks, actually. Yeah. So just
5 weeks. Okay.
From the 16th of July to the 20th of August. That's a 5-week window of holy crap. That was quick.
That's crazy unprecedented when it comes to a Disney thing. So that tells me one of two things. Either they already didn't want to do another one of these and they had determined that well before the finale, or they saw like the thing in its totality after the finale and they're like, nah, nope, not again.
Fool me once, shame on you. Or fool me once, shame on. Yeah.
I mean, Kathleen Kennedy's been fooling them for quite a bit.
I can't even get the analogy out right because I don't know. I've laughed about the Acolyte a little bit. Outside of making the video, I did chuckle
once or twice.
I was like, this just never works. And then I thought to myself, somebody out there is actually upset about this. And then I really laughed. That's when I had my moment. I was like, wow, there are people out there like that are actually on Twitter going, it was such a great show.
Actually,
that's the best part.
Some of the comments I've seen remind me of the old sci-fi message boards when Firefly was canceled.
Oh.
Because there's no Facebook, there's no Twitter, none of that stuff. It was just message boards and weird. That was about it because it didn't have really Reddit at that point.
Yeah.
And of the sci-fi communities, it felt like it was a loud enough voice, but it really wasn't. And I enjoyed Firefly a lot, but I knew exactly what it was. I knew it wasn't sustainable.
It wasn't something that you might have been able to squeeze one more season out of it, but I don't really know where exactly you'd go with it. Like you told all the ragtag stories and you kind of fleshed out each of the characters decently well enough that would I have liked more if it was of quality? Sure. But I'm perfectly fine with just rewatching the one season.
I will say this, they did like a pre-Snyderverse campaign that ended up getting enough traction to the studios to actually produce Serenity.
Yeah, that's how we got the movie.
If that success was going to revive the show, but I knew, and I was barely in Hollywood at that point. I knew at the time there's no way they were going to get the box office number to justify it getting put back on the air. And even one of my best friends at the time, who was a huge Firefly fan, was saying, "Yes, it's just got to make this much." I'm like, I think the target was like 200 million, and I'm like, it's never going to make 200 million. It'd be lucky if it broke 20. And yeah, that was just the case. But again, like there's always going to be those diehard fans out there that legitimately like the show and just don't have the best of taste for the general audiences for it to be sustainable. Sure. What's funny here is that now that we have the Facebooks, the Instagrams, the TikToks, the Twitter X's, all that stuff, you have ability to amplify it even more, where you have basically the possibility of a movement like release the Snyder Cut, which worked only because Zack Snyder invented in a private PR company to amp it up. And then once they finally got that cut, what did it move out next to? Restore the Snyderverse. And it was just a barrage of horrible social media posts and things of that nature to push something that nobody wanted. I'm wondering if this is now for the Acolyte, if this is actually something they're going to try and see if they can secure, because the tactics and the instructions are right there to get it done. All they have to do is the numbers, and it would be horrifying, but also very, very funny, because there's probably a lot of YouTube channels out there that are thinking, you know what, this getting a second season could be financially valuable to me or them.
Yeah.
I'd have loved it. It was a good check.
It's quite funny with the Acolyte, especially because as much as I hated this series, as horrible as it was on like every just broad measure you could apply to any piece of live action media, it's actually more hysterical and fun for me to see the reactions of some of these people that are upset about its cancellation. It's like, if all y'all actually watched it, it might have had slightly better numbers. But like, there's enough bots out there, and I think dishonest and disingenuous people on social media just saying, and you can tell too, because it's not like they're saying anything specific. It's like when you know a reviewer for a movie or a book or a game didn't actually complete the book or game or movie. They just know sort of kind of the bare bones of the piece of media, and so they're giving you very like vague blanket statements, literary fluff, and they're not giving you anything of substance. Like, you can't tell me why the show is actually good. You can't tell me why anything in this series matters. You're just complaining that it got canceled and it happened to have, you know, a female lead that wasn't white. And that's the best you got and the best you can do. And so the result of that is you end up complaining and crying and saying that, oh no, this thing only got canceled because the dude bros that are all white and straight didn't like the series and review bombed it. No, look, if all of us actually watched it, it would have actually done enough numbers to maybe justify getting renewed for a second season. But you know what happened?
Nothing.
Disney and Lucasfilm have pushed the Star Wars audience, us, regular Star Wars viewers, into this position of apathy for so long now that the vast majority of people don't even care enough to hate watch it to see how bad it is. Like, there's an odd pleasure sometimes in seeing the train wreck happen in real time, right? Like, there can be some fun, and that's like, okay, how bad is this? It not a matter of how bad can it be. It's, you know, it's going to be bad, and you're kind of curious just how much. Nobody, for the most part, even cares enough to do that.
What's tragic is that it is slightly better than Ahsoka. I mean, it does. I mean, as ridiculous as Ahsoka is, and as ridiculous as parts of the Acolyte are, the Acolyte is slightly better than Ahsoka because it's not full of itself in the same way that Dave Filoni was with Ahsoka. Characters had goals, even though they changed, but they weren't empty, vacuous goals in the same sense of what Ahsoka was, which is, was it Sabine? I want to go find my friend because I miss him, but I'm not in love with him. He's just someone I miss, and I've been living perfectly fine without him.
Right.
Ahsoka, we found this ancient map that leads us to Thrawn. How do you have an ancient map that leads to a character that was born centuries after it was created?
Mm-hmm.
Like, again, that is stupid stuff that surprisingly was not as heavily used in the Acolyte. The only thing that the Acolyte did that was ridiculous is the Power of Many song. That was pretty cringeworthy, but it was also comical. Like, the thing is like,
it felt like a freaking late 90s spoof film.
I could make a better argument to save the Acolyte more so than the people who actually want it back could, and I could probably do it by trashing Ahsoka. But the thing is that it's really, I mean, there's actually a premise in the Acolyte. In Ahsoka, the premise is we just need to bring Thrawn back to the main galaxy. Like, that's a weak premise. Ahsoka,
the premise is absolutely weak for Ahsoka, for sure. I think the only reason Ahsoka stands more for more people is probably because it has characters that are more recognizable. And so regardless of how piss poor the writing truly is, people see that there's some, or people perceive, I should say more accurately, as there being some value there just because it has some characters that they recognize and are more familiar with. It's
predicated on the Clone War and the Rebel, the Star Wars Rebels shows.
It's like, I hate to say this to y'all, but Kenobi had Obi-Wan Kenobi in it, and it was still trash.
Yes, that was the worst one to me.
It's the worst one for me in terms of lore. Like, that one was when I was like, oh man, y'all had a layup. This was the easiest possible thing you could have ever done, and you actually managed to screw this up.
No, they should have made it more like a Princess Bride story with Bail Organa telling young Leia stories of his adventures with Obi-Wan Kenobi during the Clone War. Instead, they went to the whole Obi-Wan is saving Princess Leia, and then they botched the easiest scene ever, which is, so instead of walking around the the laser beam field. They just tried to shoot it off. But the reason why it's ridiculous is because they do not convey that Obi-Wan was planning to steal the speeder so that he can drive it through.
Yeah.
That's the only reason you'd ever have to shoot that off or anything. If she said, get to the speeder, and then he blows that thing up. It's like, oh, that makes sense. Cause and effect. No, they don't have that at all. They just, okay, we're running, blow it up. You can
just bad writing. Just completely terrible writing. Like and this is why there are a lot of rules when it comes to writing. However, a lot of them are more like guidelines than actual rules. In that sometimes you do need to tell rather than just show, because that is an example of where some small bit of dialogue that cued the viewer a bit more so that the scene didn't look completely asinine and get us all laughing our butts off at it. Like that would have fixed that scene. Something very simple. Like how many milliseconds did it take for you to come up with that fix for it? Script.
I did it on the fly.
Yeah, exactly. You didn't even have to think about it. Why? Because you're a good writer and you know what the hell you're doing.
Again, there are definitely lots of guidelines, but there's also a simple rule, like a rule that should be unbreakable, and that is cause and effect.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I mean, the guys that do South Park, they live by this rule. They're like, this happens, therefore this happens. As like, right. It has to all connect. If they're too divorced, that's when you lose your engagement from the audience. But
right. Well, in writing, if you're telling a story, then, if you are saying this happens, okay, what happens next? What's next? That's the very next step. And so if you have an event and there's no what preceded this to make this event make any level of sense, you've got this huge disconnect in your narrative.
And what are the consequences of that event as well? Like that's also very important. You can't because you cannot do the and then part, because the and then part is several different ideas that are not always dependent on each other, that are just happening for the sake of happening. And you find that more often in a plot driven story than a character driven story, because the character's motivation is always, I do this. All right, you did this. As a result of doing this, how does it affect other characters, and how do they react or respond to that? And do those reactions affect the character that caused the initial effect? And that's how you get the story. You can plot it out very, very naturally in a lot of ways. The moment that it doesn't work is when you deviate from the motivation of that character, or you don't justify a change in the character's motivations. And the Acolyte actually does this quite well, which is, why does Osha or whatever the other one's name is, whose name I forget,
May,
yes, there. Why does May decide to no, I'm not going to kill the Jedi anymore? Why? Like, we don't get that. Like, it's supposed to be implied that her conversation or seeing Osha alive is what stimulated that, but they did nothing with it. It feels like a whole scene or a chunk of that show was just left on the cutting room floor.
And then she recanted on that very quickly too. So she just flip-flopped in the span of an episode or 2 episodes.
See, part of me feels like this was probably a little bit more coherent, but their desire to recut the show to make it have a mystery type of genre around it of like, well, what happened at the Coven? I think really botched it up, because now they realized, oh, okay, we got to the setup too quickly. We put these characters together too quickly. We did the whole she's going to kill Squid Game guy. And again, I'm forgetting their names. That's how impactful they are.
Master Soul,
Squid Game guy, and it's like,
that was his name.
That should probably happen after her change. And there's just so many things that are just way out of whack.
Who do you think's responsible for that script?
Probably Kathleen Kennedy. Because one thing we do know in the reports is that Leslie went to Kathy with a script that was good, and then Kathleen Kennedy told her to rewrite it to make it more of her story. And the fact of the matter is that Leslie Headland objectively is a superior writer compared to Dave Filoni. Is she a superior writer in general aspect? No. But she has done things outside of Disney with other companies that have made the money. She did Russian Doll on Netflix, which was actually quite profitable. She's done stage plays, which were actually well reviewed and made some money. So she's actually earned her merit to a degree, but she is definitely not A tier. She's like lower B, C+ tier writer. The moment that you put, and this is why I feel for a lot of other people that have potential and are being brought into the Disney fold is that the moment you get into Disney, you are no longer in control of your own agency of what you do and how you do it. It's this is the corporation, this is our brand, this is our models. You will manipulate your works that we love, but you'll make them more like Disney because we love Disney more.
May as
And
well
it's
be
not-
operating within the CCP.
Pretty much. I mean, it's totally there. Like, the funny thing is that even if you go to Paramount, Universal, Sony, or Warner Brothers, they don't like to do that many changes unless there's something that definitely violates the brand. But you're never really going to get much of that because a lot of the stuff that they do is never really within their own brand. Like Warner Brothers likes to make original films. They have their IPs and stuff that they do, but they make a bunch of original movies. Same with Universal, Sony, and Paramount. Disney is a company that is predicated on solely doing adaptations, starting with fairy tales and then coming up with some other stuff. It wasn't until Pixar got involved that they started doing original children's movies. When they had Touchstone and Hollywood Pictures, that's where they were able to be more experimental with their original stuff and keep it away from Disney. But Disney was always supposed to be targeted as a child's brand, family values, which a whole bunch of suspect stuff I've reiterated many times before. But if we were to do something like, for instance, they have the Wile E. Coyote movie that was done at Warner Brothers that ended up getting shuttered because nobody wanted to pay what Warner Brothers needed in order for it to make sense on their financial sheets, and it wasn't good enough to Warner's to release it themselves. So what ended up happening here is that you have something that it didn't necessarily betray the brand, which and Warner Brothers, their Looney Tunes, their Merry Melodies, all those characters, they are very protective of those. So it wasn't bad enough to say, oh, this is so bad we need to change it or go back to reshoot. Instead, Zaslav said, this is not great, but it's not damaging to our brand. But if we can sell it to another company that'll distribute it, we'll be fine. And that should tell you more about how Warner Brothers operates than anything else, because they believed enough in the movie to not actually go spend more money to reshoot it because they felt everything was wrong with it. They just said, it's not exactly up to par, but it's not so egregious enough that we have to remake it in our own image. We think it could be passable, but we know the market probably won't be profitable in this regard. And so they said, let's just shutter it off to something else. Same thing when it comes to Batman Caped Crusader. Of all the Batman cartoons, it is the worst in some of the approach of things, but that's actually not necessarily a terrible thing to say for that show, because compare it to other cartoons with similar production costs, the Batman is still quite good. I mean, I don't like a lot of the story changes, but the artwork is fine. The voice work, except for Hamish Linklater, who sucks, that was okay. But like, there's been a lot of Batman shows where the animated series is always going to be at the top, but the other Batman cartoon shows, the Hanna-Barbera ones, they're a close second. Or they're just shy of, Batman Brave and the Bold. I would put Batman Caped Crusader probably neck and neck with Beware the Batman, if you remember that short-lived computer animated
Never
show.
saw that one.
Yep, I do.
I mean, they did some significant changes to some characters there as well, but definitely didn't have any of. I mean, again, the Caped Crusader has its woke elements, but they're very much they were not as woke as they potentially could be. But the thing is that they didn't, even though they did the show, they didn't actually. They gave the agency to Bruce Timm, to J.J. Abrams, to the rest of the people there, to say, okay, this is what you want to do, and we don't think it's horribly damaging, but we don't want to put it on our platform. We'll sell it out. And Amazon said, this is good enough for us to buy. Warner Brothers is like, yeah, we're not going to go back. We're not going to reanimate it. We're not going to rework it or anything. Let it do its own thing. We know our brand is strong enough to persevere in spite of this. We're fine. That's a creator-friendly studio. You may not agree with the interpretations. I definitely don't. I mean, take a look at what they did with the Snyderverse and all that stuff. I hated it too. But again, they were creator-friendly. They still supported it. The Flash would probably be the only time where they said, this is so bad, we are going to reshoot it over and over again until we get it right. But that was mostly done by...
Well, they still didn't get it right.
Oh, no, they definitely didn't. In fact, they could have saved themselves another $200 million if they just released it the same year that The Batman came out, which was the original plan. But yeah, I mean, like, that's one thing that you have over there where, okay, they allowed the creators to put their stamp on something. They They took a swing on it. It didn't work. They won't work with them again, but they at least said, you don't have to make it our brand. Like, you don't have to manipulate your integrity of your art for our brand. Even if it sucks, we'll at least let it be sucks. But the difference being is that with Disney, it's Disney's manipulation. With Warner Brothers, with Paramount, with Universal, it's the director and the writers.
Right.
Like, you actually can isolate exactly who's at fault when it comes to those studios versus Disney. Because when you take a look at some of the people that have worked for Disney and left and then did other things, one aspect being, James Gunn before and after, you can kind of see, he had a little bit more fun with, say we will about the Suicide Squad. It's a great mockery of the Snyderverse. And then it doubles down with Peacemaker. And then when he came back to do Guardians 3, well, that's also a nice little nudge and mockery to Disney itself and Marvel, with the High Evolutionary clearly standing in for those two entities. And because he had his job safe and secure at Warner Brothers, there's nothing Disney could do to make him change it. and that's how it worked out. But with the stuff that he did over at with the Endgame, like, they had to change some of the things he did there because he was already kicked out by that point.
So I think this is actually super interesting topic, especially with regards to, I want to circle back to what you mentioned about Warner Brothers being a more, I guess, creative friendly is how you put it, company, in terms of, like, they're not going to try and, strong arm you into changing your script to their vision, how they see their characters. And I agree with that approach, and at the same time, I don't. I feel like there's a happy medium somewhere where, at least in the case of, say, a company actually does have a proper understanding of the IPs that they preside over and that they have ownership over, to where if somebody turns in something that doesn't read like the characters, doesn't read like a story would in this particular universe, it should be tweaked to actually do that. You can try and experiment a little bit. I feel like in a healthy creative environment, there's always a little bit of wiggle room to try and see if something new can work, while still packaging it in a way that people who are that's a hell of a poster. People who are fans of a particular IP do have certain expectations of that, and you get a little bit of give with those, right? And so it's, in Disney's case, they, to what you were saying earlier, is that they were taking this thing and it's like, oh, well, you need to repackage it and change it to be in line with exactly how we want things right now. And unfortunately, Disney is an example of one of those companies. This includes the MCU, this includes Lucasfilm, where they don't actually understand the IPs and the characters that they hold, but they still strong arm creatives into adhering to this, like, overall I guess message and framework that they want their stories to operate inside of. I feel like in an optimal perfect world, which we do not live in, and the creative space has not existed in a very long time outside of the independent sphere, with guys like Jeff putting out Wokebusters and stealing Solo and Ahsoka the Rippaverse and all of that. Like, in the mainstream, if you had one of these big corporations who properly understood the IPs that they hold, and they exercise just enough, I don't necessarily want to use the word control, but I guess that's a decent enough word for it.
It would be responsibility would be the best word, because Disney is,
because you don't want to damage the brand, right?
Exactly. Disney is so corporate that Disney is corporate in the sense that they're corporate in fear as opposed to corporate in integrity. Because a good corporation will be like, we know what sells, we know how this sells, we know these are our guidelines for how this maintains it. So, for instance, take a look at something like Harry Potter over at Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers, when they made their deal with J.K. Rowling to do those films, and Chris Columbus did the first one, they basically said, we recognize exactly how these books work and how they sell, and we know that that has to be done. Now, we are going to understand that there's going to be some exceptions made with the adaptation process. But we know that with our market research, that if we do it this way, this is actually going to resonate the best for the target audience that we're aiming for. And that's what Warner Brothers did. Now that kind of changed after.
That's why those movies were pretty successful.
Exactly, but it also changed a little bit after Kevin Tsuchihara was like ousted out of Warner Brothers, and then they got all these replacements in. They had Jeff Johns, they had Walter Hamada. Jeff Johns, I think he should stick to comic books because he's better suited to that narrative. I've read his screenplays; they are atrocious. To think that he actually wrote good comic books, you would not believe when you read some of the screenplays.
He's an example, and actually, as much as I love J.K. Rowling, both of them are examples of individuals who are talented writers within the medium in which they can properly operate out of. Jeff Johns, he can write just a god tier comic book. J.K. Rowling, I adore the Harry Potter novels. However, neither of those two can write a movie script because they don't understand. They don't understand the pacing for it.
Well, I mean, the thing is, the rules are relatively the same. Yes, there's a different level of pacing. It's more compressed. The other part too is that with a novel, with anything you read, the pacing is always at the discretion of the reader. They can stop, turn the page whenever they want. They can stay on one page as long as they want.
Yeah.
With a movie, you don't have that. You don't have that luxury unless you're streaming it, in which case you can pause. But why would you want to pause on a frame of a film when it's completely antithetical to what you're doing there?
For Rowling, though, a great example is like, say, for the Fantastic Beasts films. I enjoy those, especially the first one. Though the second and third have a lot of problems. And when I look at them in hindsight and I look at them in their totality, I can see where J.K. Rowling was struggling to, and I'm pretty sure she also had a co-writer when it came to the screenplay part of it, but she was in charge mostly of the story. I can see where there was a struggle between trying to transfer the amount of space that she usually has to flesh out ideas, because in the Harry Potter novels, there are ideas and things presented in book 1 that don't actually pay off until like book 5, 6, or 7, because she's playing a long game, right? And she's used to having all this space and all this time to work with. But then you go to a 2-hour movie script, right? And you're only given a couple of movies, and that's only a handful of hours. Some people can compress things and work within that framework, and others cannot. And I think both she and Jeff Johns are examples of that, because Jeff Johns has written some of my favorite comic books of all time.
Oh yeah, the thing is, it's down to priorities, right? With film and television, you have a limited time frame, which means only the most important stuff is valid, and you have to understand, well, what makes that. What justifies its validation to you? So if you have something, for instance, your example, where if something is set up in book 1, but it's not going to pay off to book 5, well, that's something that you might have to toss aside, because if it doesn't create the setup and the payoff within that first film, or at least the encompassing of that story allows it to be a setup for a payoff for a future film without it feeling like an obvious setup. That is careful massaging of your story economy, of your time within the screenplay. That's what I think. Like, you'll often always, I mean, with the exception of Stephen King, you'll most likely hear that whenever you see a book adaptation into movie, people say the book is better. Why? You get way more out of a book. You can have 2 or 3 chapters dwelling on the life of a single character that you will never be afforded in a feature film.
That's true.
It's absolutely true.
And that goes a long way, because that helps build a different level of connection with your reader. In a movie, you have your 90 minutes to 2 hours, and if you do it right, you can forge that connection, but it's still never going to be as intimate as the one that you have reading the book. And that's something that you have to reconcile with. And there's a lot of people that go from novels, comic books, to feature films or television series that don't understand that reconciliation, because they're so comfortable in the time and pacing. I mean, that's one of the things that I actually kind of thought was kind of funny, because when I was starting writing, like the first stuff I would write would be short stories, and then I'd write comic book stuff. And then, I got a very small contract back in the year 2001 with an Australian company. And the only reason they went out of business is because they paid all of us, but the print costs that they had spiked before they got to our runs of issues that they're going to print and sell. So all the stuff that they already sold to local comic book shops in Sydney and Perth and all those places did not pay for the printing run for the next set of issues and the titles that I worked on, because the prices just skyrocketed in between that quarter. So we got to keep our rights. We got to keep our money. Everything was fine. That company shut her down. But I was like, oh, but when I took that to Hollywood, and it's like, oh, you have comic book scripts. And when I would show them and show some of the samples I have and some of the bad scans from the artist that would email me back in, the Hotmail days before Gmail was a thing. You still got some pretty good compliments, but you also got, ooh, can you actually do movies though? And that was a big hurdle for me to convince people too, because they're like, we know how comic books are. We buy the rights to them when we adapt them, but there's a lot of pages that we have to, toss out, unfortunately, from the book because we just don't have the time to put them in the movie. Or in vice versa. Sometimes they'll be like, we have a comic book that we want to adapt. It's really great, but it's super slim. We got to pad this out so we can hit that minimum 90-minute mark. How do we do that? That's a whole another part. But just doing that convincing aspect, that's always been a challenge for a lot of people. And what's even funnier is that, especially around that time between 2006 and 2012, there were a ton of screenwriters who were being encouraged because of the comic book rights purchasing boom, were being encouraged, hey, your screenplay that you have, go find an artist, go turn it into a comic book. It was still expensive to do that on your own at that time. Today, costs are a lot more streamlined, which makes it really beneficial. But back then, it was a pain in the ass because I was told, all your science fiction scripts are great. Why don't you do them as a comic book? Yes. Do you have $250,000 to make it into a comic book? Because that's how much it's going to cost to make it into a comic book.
Producing comic books, and I can say this, and obviously Script you can, and obviously we know Jeff can as well. It is not a cheap thing. It is a very difficult, strenuous thing, but it's a very rewarding thing.
The price,
especially when you put out books as good as Jeff's.
Yeah, I mean the prices have dropped since then, but it's still pretty expensive.
I just am coming from like the angle of like, I wish somebody gave me $250,000 to like do my own thing. I don't need that much money. I'm not going to tell you how much it's going to cost because that's none of your business. But
right,
it's not going to like
correct.
It's not going to be six figures. I mean, that's the thing, right?
No, I don't.
If your comic books cost six figures to actually produce, you are bad at business.
Yeah, well, especially today, because back in 2008, I went to all the cheapest artists. I went to all the cheapest printers. The lowest I could get was, I think, $210, and that's even printing overseas. And it's like that's your art, that's your inking, that's even a black and white and a perfect bound and all those things that you needed. And it was like, this is how much it's going to cost. And why? Well, because a lot of the printers already had contracts with the already bigger publishers. And if you wanted to get their rates and their rates, you had to produce at their quantity. And their quantity was in the millions, not the thousands that you would need. So when it's in the thousands, that price goes up. When it's in the millions, that price goes down. Nowadays, there's a lot more printers, and they're actually willing to have a bit more economically achievable expenses. And then you also have way more artists now and way more connections to artists because, again, 2008 to 2012, social media was still on the rise. Not a whole lot of people were actually showcasing, hey, I'm a freelance comic book artist or a storyboard artist or anything of that. Come hire me. Here are my rates. You didn't have that. You had a very small pool that you could access at that time. And if there was other people out there, it was very hard to find because there's no real path to networking like there is today.
Well, sure. Think about it back in the days before we move on and get to John Thomas's generous super chat. Think about back in the day, like not even just the early 2000s, but think like the 90s and before that, like artists, they would have to actually manually mail in their samples to publishers, right? Go to what few conventions there were at the time and go up to, editors and publishers and things like that and try and pitch their work and convince them of like, hey, I'm good enough to actually work on this stuff. And a lot of the times, especially back in the early 90s and prior, there was a sort of house style mentality to where if your work didn't really fall in line with what the general visual was for most of the books in their publishing line at the time, they just wouldn't even entertain it. They'd take a look at it and be like, that's too weird. Like Todd McFarlane, for example, got rejected a zillion times because of that, right? So, and there are stories like that with a zillion guys out there that we would now recognize as household names, at least as comic book fans, right? But now, to your point, Script, in the 2020s and even late 2010s, you can go online. You can see people's art stations, and if they have sequential work, they'll have it demoed on there. And then a lot of guys that are indie artists, they'll have their own freaking websites with their commission work, whether it's splash pages, whether it's pinup stuff, or whether it's sequential work, and you can get a good idea. It's actually incredibly easy to find an artist for a book these days.
Yeah. Oh, it is.
People are hungry. People in the indie space are hungry for work.
And you get lucky enough to find the one that can deliver on time. Even better, because I've encountered artists where they're like, yeah, they're really good. It's like, oh, but it's going to take me 6 months before you turn in a page. What the hell? What are you doing?
4 years to turn in a 60-page book or something like that.
Maybe. I mean, it all depends. Like, it depends on how much the work that they're doing. But again, if it's just, you have a separate writer, you have an editor, you have a penciler, an inker, and a colorist. Well, how long is that penciler taking? If that penciler is taking too long, it doesn't matter if the work's immaculate. It's basically like, does the work reflect the proper pace? Because I've seen some artists that they do a great piece of work in 2 weeks, and then they come back with something that they refined after months. And I'm like, I know there's a difference. I don't have the eye to see that there's a difference. And if I don't have the eye to see that there's a difference, there's a chance there's a lot of other people reading it that don't have the eye to see the difference. So you wasted your time and mine with that revision on something where, if I know that you can do it in 2 weeks, I'd rather have the 2-week version. And if there has to be changes, we can always go back and make changes until then. But I don't like that. My buddy's been dealing with an artist like that too. Great artist. He takes on too much work though. That's the problem. And that's why he's late too.
Overloads his schedule.
Stuff because he wants to make sure he has that weekly paycheck, and I'm like, I empathize with that, but sometimes you got to prioritize.
It's commission work game. If you're, self-employed as a commission artist, then I get it. That's tough. That's rough.
Yep.
John Thomas, thank you for your $10 super chat.
He says, did anyone read that moronic comic about the origins of Shepherd books, about as well as the Buffy the 9th season comic books? Also, the TikTok meltdowns for Acolyte are effing epic. I need to write that down and maybe do a compilation.
Dude, oh my gosh. A compilation of the TikTok meltdowns would probably be actually really hysterical and do good numbers for the channel.
There you go. I wrote it down. I'm going to do it.
Easy money.
I did not see this moronic comic about the origins of Shepherd books. Have you guys?
No, I'm not familiar with it. I have heard about the 9th season Buffy stuff, but I haven't actually looked into it. I have heard of it, though.
What about you, Script? Any of this ringing a bell?
I've definitely heard about the Buffy 9th season comic books. They're not good. No, I'm not.
Most extra season comic books for TV series aren't. Like, anybody read the comic book
Shepherd
for
books,
Smallville season 11?
Oh God. I had some friends send me digitals of that. I'm like, why?
I'm sorry.
Why? They turned Barbara Gordon into Nightwing. It was they made Superman have a lead chest emblem for reason.
What's the reason?
Why not?
Because he keeps on getting shot with kryptonite bullets because they're so common. It's not. I mean, I will say this: the comic book is actually at the quality of the show, and the show is not a good quality. So it doesn't work.
I was gonna say, look, the show has a lot of charm to it in some seasons and episodes, some more than others.
Here and there. Yeah.
However, if in hindsight, if you look at that series, a lot of the shit that we complain about, or at least used to complain about when it came to CW stuff, started back there.
And those guys that started it are writing the Beetlejuice movie.
How do you feel about that? I'm concerned.
Oh, that's
I'm pretty concerned. Listen, I'm concerned too as well. They've never written a feature film before. However, they do have something that will help them that they never had before, and that is we have Tim Burton as a director. Who Tim Burton hasn't really been Tim Burton for a while, but he got really close with Wednesday. And that felt like a schizophrenic show because there's definitely something going on there in the right direction, but it felt like something was pulling it into another place that just didn't quite work. It was like Tim Burton wanted to do. I want to do a fun mystery story with Wednesday Addams as the detective, and Al Gough and Miles Miller were like, yeah, but we write teenagers that are anxious and lovelorn and lovesick. And that was like a battle that they tried to reconcile.
The CW house style is what that is.
Pretty much. And the thing is that now it's like, oh, they're writers, but Tim Burton is also now a director of a feature film. Directors have way more control over the final product than showrunners do over a television series, especially on Netflix. So they have reversed roles here, where Tim Burton is now in charge. So will Tim Burton be able to make, lemonade out of these lemons? There's already one red flag, and that is in the trailer where apparently Winona Ryder's character is a legend because of the events that happened at her house, which nobody in that town knew was occurring.
Yeah, I'm
So
already.
I don't remember that
legend
ever
of that.
being public knowledge to
It
people.
was never anything of that nature. So the fact that they even referenced that, I'm like, you've now just made your movie a little bit too self-aware of its importance in pop culture inside the story. Your hacks, your hacks. If that's only in the trailer, then that's a marketing thing. But the fact that it was in the trailer is not a good sign.
Yeah, self-aware of in-universe stuff, when I want to say when overdone, almost any use of it at all is overdone. It's, if anything, just obnoxious to me, especially when there's precedent for there being no reason for it. Like in this case with Beetlejuice, like the events that were happening in that house were not public knowledge.
Yeah, a couple
nobody.
everyone else got away.
It's like
Yeah.
they're looking at this like Hocus Pocus, where the witches actually went to the town and then put that spell on them to dance until they died. That's a legend. In Beetlejuice,
That movie's
nothing of
also
that.
fantastic.
It's got its moments, but yeah, it's funny.
I say fantastic in that it is one of those things that it's hard not to want to watch it during Halloween because it's just fun. And
Are
I
you
don't
talking
want.
the original Hocus Pocus or the new
Yeah,
one?
don't go to the sequel. That was
I have not seen the sequel.
Oh, okay.
Never should have been.
I'm talking the original Hocus Pocus, and I don't use the word fun as a substitute for good or anything like that. But I do recognize when I watch something and I'm just enjoying myself, right?
I saw
And that's
good.
yeah, and that's one of those films that's just it's a fun time, and I will rewatch it annually. But yeah, like exactly script. There's call for it there. There absolutely is not in something like Beetlejuice. There's no reason for that. That's the writers trying to be clever and cute, or like tug on the
to the movie.
Tug on the nostalgia key strings, right? And it's like, oh, they mentioned the thing. Yeah, but if you think for half a second, there's no reason for them to mention the thing because nobody else would know about it.
See, the only way I'd accept Winona Ryder's character being a legend is if she's some sort of author of horror and strange and unusual things, because that would make sense. Oh, she's a writer. She does ghost stories that seem so real, so visceral, so authentic. Everything feels like it kind of really is like she walked beyond the veil and entered the afterlife. There's something that makes sense. That's not established in the trailer. It's heavily implied that the events of Beetlejuice is what made her a legend. It's like nobody would know that. And then you also step on the joke of the handbook for the recently deceased, which gets republished in the mortal world. And it's a comedy. It's treated like a stereo instructions. And that's the running joke. Where's you step on that now too?
Mm-hmm.
Jeez.
I'm concerned too, because it's like with some of these other legacy sequels, they think they understand the iconic parts and they think they understand what makes the story work.
Clearly, they don't.
The big part about Beetlejuice is it's not really about Beetlejuice and Lydia. It's about the Maitlands, and they're not in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So you're trying to do these callbacks to this movie without the main characters.
Yeah.
Like I don't think the movie's aware of what it is. It just looks like a big old commercial to me.
No, I mean, that was one of my, that and the movie Hell of Troy was one of the reasons I would always justify when they said, why is your title not of the main character, but of someone else? I'm like, it's because that's the story around them. I'm like, Beetlejuice wasn't about Beetlejuice. It was about,
No, it's not.
It was about Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis's character.
Mm-hmm.
Helen of Troy. It's not really about Helen of Troy. It's about the two guys fighting over her.
Yeah,
like,
it's about Achilles and oh gosh, what the hell
I
was...
keep forgetting the guy's name too. Well, Achilles is the soldier leading the charge for
At least I'm not the only one that's forgetting.
Again, but I'm just.
There was Achilles, and there was Hector, and then there was
Hector B. Pool.
No, what was
Sorry, I'm glad you got that.
Yeah, I'm forgetting.
It's gonna bug me that I can't remember.
Well, Just look it up, man. You're on the internet.
Yeah, I know. I just so I mean, it was definitely it was Paris.
Paris.
Yeah,
Paris. That's the one. Yep.
Chris got it right in the
Thank
chat.
you,
Shout out to you,
Chris.
Chris.
Shout out to Chris.
Thank you, sir. So yeah, I mean, like, it's just it's a weird thing there. I mean, I'm hoping that Keaton's performance, if he gets to have fun with it, because he's going to be in the movie a lot more than he was in the original, because he was basically in like 10 or 11 minutes of the original film.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, seeing him more would be great. They got Marina Baccarini. No, not Marina Baccarini.
Monica Bellucci.
Monica Bellucci. Thank you. Same initials. Same initials,
That is
but
true.
bigger breasts.
Hey, and that's not a problem.
Monica Bellucci, as his wife that he divorced, or I don't know. It basically is a callback to the finger that he had of hers and took the ring off.
Oh, she meant nothing to me. Oh God.
Yeah.
See, I'm out of this movie doubly. They're trying to take little jokes. Oh, it's such an iconic scene in the movie. No, the fuck it's not. Stop this shit, Hollywood. Get it. Get what you're making. You need to get people that aren't just going to go watch the movie over the weekend and go, all right, iconic Beetlejuice parts. Let's just take an outline of this idea that we came up with something for something else. And
They
now
probably-
it's a Beetlejuice movie.
They probably pulled those iconic Beetlejuice parts off of a freaking shitty YouTube or TikTok video.
They also have way too
from
many
somebody who saw the movie once.
They have way too many of the shrunken head guys. That was only a one-off. So yeah, this is basically, part of me is getting weird flashbacks to the Bob Hoskins Super Mario movie.
Oh
just with
God,
how weirdly it's being handled. But see, a gag like that, where it's like, oh, he says this one-off gag of the wife, she meant nothing to me. That kind of works in a television series that's ongoing, where you're like, oh, we do a joke about the wife, season 2, season 3. Let's bring the wife in because we mentioned that there's a wife. In a movie, just go somewhere new and don't go backwards to your. Don't be a.
They're trying to do what they deem as safe, even though it's not actually safe because it's not pulling off of something of substance.
Well, I mean, it's safe over risk, and the thing is, risks are what set trailblazer. Risks are used by trailblazers, and everybody else follows in lockstep.
Well,
afterwards.
Risks create innovation.
So does a restrained budget, Disney.
They don't know what that is. Script. Come on.
Exactly.
None of us are new here.
But yeah, I mean, that's the sad part is that there's so many. I mean, there are a lot of original screenplays out there. There are some that are adaptations. They can be done very affordably. And there is a mentality on the studio side of things for a number of players, not all of them, but a number of them, where it's like, nope, every movie we greenlight has to at the very least make $750 million globally at the box office. And if it's a tentpole film, it has to cross that billion. And there's no one prominent enough except for maybe Jason Blum, who's like, I will still make the $10 million movies because if I make enough of those $10 million movies, I will make $1 billion at the box office year round. And it's true.
Works for him.
It does. And there's no reason the studios shouldn't be doing this. I think I strongly suspect Warner Brothers is going to be doing that soon. Yes, they're going to have their tentpole films, especially for their bigger IPs like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, DC. Nothing wrong with that. That's fine. Those technically deserve the investment. However, their investments are actually curtailed, which is nice to hear. But yeah, we just need the producers and the guys that are writing the checks to be like, you know what? I see this original movie as being a low budget, but hitting a lot of the right emotional moments. In fact, so like I'll plug my show now. So I do a show called Scripts on Saturdays. The very first episode I covered a screenplay called Madden, which is a part biopic of John Madden and part origin story of the football game Madden. David O. Russell is now the director to that screenplay, and he has also rewritten it. So, and it's going to be starring Nicolas Cage playing John Madden.
No shit.
That is an original script that is being put into production with 2 names behind it, and it could be a great feel-good movie. And it is not the only script I've reviewed on that show that has actually been picked up and is going into production. Some are being self-financed by the writers themselves, but they're out there. And someone, even though you might not like David O. Russell, and I completely understand, he's at least knows the right people to take a shot on something that is not an Acolyte, not a Star Wars, not a Marvel.
That bar is subterranean script.
It is, but the thing is, it's out there. Here's the other part too. I don't think that movie's going to do Barbenheimer or anything, but it might be as well received as Tetris was, because Tetris was a great movie. That was also another original story.
I didn't see that, but I remember hearing that it actually did surprisingly well and was pretty good.
Yes, it's a really good movie. It didn't have much of a theatrical run because it was mostly an Apple Plus production, but it's a very fun movie. It actually makes fun of communist Russia a lot.
Good. I need to watch it because I tried to watch all the video game movies because they're all going to be better than Borderlands script. All of them.
I mean, okay, so again, I want to circle back to what I just said about 35 seconds ago. Bar, subterranean.
I know. I did it to myself.
I'll tell you what video game movie I'm hyped for. I'm hyped for Sonic 3.
Well, I'm no longer confident on the Legend of Zelda movie.
I was never confident on the Legend of Zelda movie.
Well, okay, that was.
But I loved both Sonic films, and I love Legend of Zelda. Don't get me wrong. I just never had much in the way of confidence about a live action one being treated properly.
It's Avi Arad, man. That's what I'm concerned about.
No, and you should be. And the other part too is it's never going to be as good as the cartoon show.
Well,
So suddenly Subterranean went down to 9th circle of hell. Because that's pretty darn bad. That show is awful. I'm sorry. The freaking Super Mario Brothers cartoon was better than that. And that was a garbage show too.
I mean, it worked for the time. I mean, that's the thing. It was a charming, fun, harmless. It was a harmless thing that they did because even at that time, the lore of Super Mario was almost non-existent.
Yeah, that's true. Well, lore of Super Mario Brothers is not very interconnected. Honestly, it's about as interconnected as Final Fantasy is.
Right.
You'll know that one better than me.
Avi Arad, the only thing you know that he's going to try and do, he'll probably still stick to the toyetic aspect of it, but I don't think there's a proper merchandising contract for toys. I think it's basically he's going to try and market it up with another Legend of Zelda game that might be coming out in pair with that film, which I suspect that game is going to sell well regardless of the movie. If anything, the game would pay for the movie because it might not do well if they don't get the right final team in place.
Well, remember the last one sold 10 million copies in 3 days.
Yeah.
So each game is and that Zelda's a $60. No, I think Zelda went to $69. I think that specific game was $10 more. So, I mean, Nintendo could make a bunch of money over a weekend and still make a bullshit movie. I just hope they don't.
Me too.
Because Mario was good.
Mario animated film was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that movie quite a lot. I meant to pick it up on 4K. I still haven't. I do intend to. That was a fun movie. It was a fun surprise. I was glad that I had as good a time as I did. I hope that follows with Sonic 3 because I had a blast with the first two.
Well, I just want you to have a good time, man. That's all. You're my friend. I care about you. I want you to go into a movie and go, I had a good time.
I want to go into any movie and say I had a good time. And I feel like that's how we all actually agree on that. We want to enjoy things.
I enjoyed Alien Romulus. I was able to have a good time with that.
I still haven't seen it, and I need to. I want to. I'm prioritizing that over seeing Deadpool and Wolverine. Like, I want to see that more. Not because I don't like Marvel characters, but because, like, I really hated Deadpool 2. As much as I had fun with the first one. But Alien Romulus, just from the trailer, I was like, okay, so it looks like they set the tone. He said, was it Fede Alvarez is the name of the director?
Fede Alvarez is the director.
He said he wanted to focus on practical effects as much as possible. I have heard that there's a couple of CGI mishaps. I am prepared for that.
There are. It's a bittersweet film for me because it breaks the cardinal rule, which is never quote a movie that's better than the one you're making. And it does that a
Oh
few
yeah,
times.
yep. I hated that scene.
It also, one of the things that I appreciate about Alien and Aliens, they didn't follow through with the rest of the sequels / prequels, is they try to make the science work, and there is a portion of the movie, and I won't say what happens, but I will just say this: atmosphere is vented, and it should prevent something from happening, but it doesn't change the course of what ends up happening. And that, and I will say this.
So it's a case of writing where you try to, in your exposition or even in your dialogue, you try to adhere too hard to hard science, which actually bites you in the butt for something else that you write later.
No, there's no dialogue used with regards to it at all. Like, that makes it even worse. It's show, and everything that they show and do contradicts what would actually happen.
Interesting. Okay.
And that's just having a cursory knowledge of science. But they have some great set pieces in there, which are kind of ruined by the thin characters. However, I will say the guy that plays the synthetic, the black guy, he is the standout of the film.
I keep seeing online, like, I've been avoiding spoilers for the most part, but I keep seeing online that he's a character that everybody seems to universally like.
Yes, and
which is kind of funny, and I'm like, okay, cool, I'm on board with it. Here's the thing: I love the original Alien. I love Aliens. I try to forget Aliens 3 and Resurrection happened. However,
so do I.
I do, and here's where I'm going to get hate from the chat and probably from y'all. I actually really like Prometheus, and I am okay with Covenant. It's an inferior. It's a lot like Force Awakens, and then it tries to be essentially a rewrite of the original and isn't as good. But there are things about it that I enjoy, and I say this all the time: if I enjoy watching something with my dad, it adds another layer of enjoyment onto that. So right now I'm on a back-to-back, mostly enjoyment spree, if that makes sense. So I have a little more leeway that I'm giving to this franchise compared to what I'm going to give Marvel, even though most people seem to have had a lot of fun with Wolverine and Deadpool. And yes, I put Wolverine first because he's the better character.
He is.
Yeah,
I don't actually like Deadpool. I've never been a fan of Deadpool.
So Fede Alvarez doesn't have a whole. He's an okay director. And also to a degree, he's not the best writer. He's actually like he wrote the Evil Dead remake in 2013. Mm-hmm. He did the story for the remake of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He has a preference for sticking into other people's genres as opposed to trying to really set his own. Because even with his Don't Breathe, that just it doesn't. It feels like I've seen that movie before. It doesn't feel like it's his. I would like him to.
Based on the trailer, it did look like he had some level of understanding of the tone and the atmosphere that made Alien.
He
creepy.
did. He got it.
No, he did. The thing is that he is copying someone else's tone and atmosphere.
But I get what I'm getting with that
voice, which is actually really detrimental because he will be forgotten in a few years.
And that's fair. But what I was getting at with that was Alien Covenant tried to do the same thing but failed. And so when I saw the trailer for Romulus, I was like, that looks like they actually understand how to do the creepy tone again. Because honestly, after the first Alien, how do you make them truly scary again? That's one of the reasons why they pivoted and went to the more action-oriented aspect for the second film. So how do you actually make it creepy and scary again? Because look, I was scared. It scared the piss out of me when I saw the original film when I was like 7 years old.
As it should have. If it didn't, I'd say you have problems. The thing is, it's not about how you scared the characters and thus the audience. It's about making the characters connect with the audience so that you fear for their lives. And unfortunately for me, none of these characters I cared if they lived or died.
They only existed to die, dude.
That's fair.
And you know what? That works for a horror film, like a flat out horror film. But what sets Aliens apart from that, especially the original Alien apart from that?
Well, you care about some of the characters.
You cared about those crew members, and you didn't know which one was going to die. And when they did die, you felt.
That's true.
in a horror movie
is
like
true.
Halloween, you don't care about many of the characters. Heck, you
No.
barely care about Jamie Lee Curtis's character.
Well,
They
Script,
could have all died, and I wouldn't really have cared.
Yeah.
but Script, this is definitely a horror movie more so than any other one. Like, it's set up 1-to-1. You got
Mhm.
the pre whatever before they go into the haunted house, and then they're picked off one by one. You got jump scares. I dug it. I thought there were a couple really effective deaths, especially the acid kill. The pregnancy scene blew me away, and that alien human hybrid was so disgusting. Like, that was unsettling.
That bothered me because it's not so much an alien human, it's an alien engineer hybrid.
Yeah.
And we've already seen that in Alien Resurrection. And second of all, the xenomorph is already a hybrid of humans. Like, that's the one thing people don't realize is that you're seeded into the human. The reason it has 2 arms and 2 legs is because the human has 2 arms, 2 legs.
Right.
If it were to go into something, if somehow a face hugger did like a spider and impregnated that, and then you had an alien spider hybrid, it would have 8 limbs and a tail. There are certain traits to it that work out. Like, that's kind of the rule of what it is. The xenomorph needs to ape some of its of what it injected with what it was gestation creature. I mean, one of the things that they haven't done with Alien, at least not committed to, is showing us other species that got infected by the face hugger and then birthed out an alien. Like, I would love to have seen an alligator alien hybrid. That would be creepy.
Oh yeah.
You could do a dog, a smaller alien that's
they kind of tried in Alien 3.
Exactly. Like, they kind of tried, but they never committed to it because it's like, oh, now you have a smaller version of it that can get into more places and get at you in the same creepy way that the face hugger can, but instead of the face hugger just impregnating you, it devours you.
Alien 3 actually insults me more than Alien Resurrection, even though Alien Resurrection, I would say, is probably the objectively...
Alien Resurrection. It's the latest one chronologically in the timeline.
I don't want to think about that.
Can we not bring that up ever again?
I think it was objectively the worst one, and that's actually me counting the AVP films too, if I really want to.
Damn stupid.
That movie's just so bad. However, Alien 3 pisses me off more because it takes the ending of 2 and says that's inconvenient for the story I want to tell here, so I'm just going to throw that out in the first 2 seconds. Right? Where they kill off Newt and they kill off Hicks because their existence is inconvenient for the story that the writer wanted to tell. And so instead of being flexible and working within that framework that was set up by what was the precedent, the writer said, nah, we'll just kill him off in the first few seconds. Like, really? That
if you would have had Hicks and reasons for Alien 3 again, that would have been sweet.
Sean Bean wanted a fair rate, and the producers didn't want to do it. And the actress that played Newt had a growth spurt and was not recognizable, so they didn't want to recast. Because it was a few years after the original, Aliens, and I understood that, but I still think you could have found enough. You could have recast Newt.
Yeah, recast. Just get over it.
Money for Sean Bean, or not Sean Bean, Michael Bean.
Yeah,
so many Baines, and they all die in their movies.
Bush's beans.
But like, there was always ways that you could have done that. I just think the fact of the matter is that the Alien franchise, after Aliens, with a little bit of it in Alien 3, it no longer had anything to say about what Alien and what the xenomorphs are and how it relates to the human condition anymore. It just started to become a Freddy Krueger film or a Jason X type of film, a unstoppable force picking off human characters one by one.
They just exist to die. Yeah.
There's not like, I would have loved to have seen, like, the other part too, you also have to consider, and I mentioned this on the Film Threat show, after 300 years, the company, the Weyland-Yutani company, still hasn't been able to nail down and control these xenomorphs. And they like, because that's basically it from the first film, from the prequels all the way to Alien Resurrection. That's like a 3-century span. Weyland-Yutani still hasn't been able to control them. And
they should give it up.
And it's basically like, yeah, you should give it up, because ideally what you would want to do, like this would be the end goal that I see, is that if Weyland Yutani got what they wanted, they would be able to create these aliens that they would kind of drop onto a colony that, say, rebelled against them. The aliens would then seed the colony. They'd have their xenomorphs. The xenomorphs would kill everything there, but then those xenomorphs would die off within a matter of weeks after they no longer had any human flesh to feed off of. And then you have now an untouched colony that they can come in and repopulate with people that would not rebel against them. And that would be an interesting story to tell.
Do you think like another defeatist style alien movie could work? Because I mean, the first two have very like, I'm not gonna say hopeful endings, but they do save the day and they all survive.
They're survivor stories.
Ripley,
They're better survivor stories. Yeah.
Yeah, they're survivor stories for sure. And I mean, they also give us one of the best female badasses of all time.
Yeah, there's a couple of gimmicks that I have rattling around that if things go well this fall, I might have an opportunity to actually pitch one of the people at 20th Century Studios for a follow-up, because it's something that should have been done by now in Aliens that hasn't. And yeah, I want to give it a shot. But there's definitely places for it to go to get it sort of back on track. But right now, I think that a lot of the people in charge have decided to settle down into the comfortable position of, no, we just need it's kind of like they oversimplify it the way that fans oversimplify how difficult is it to write a Blade movie. It's really hard to write a Blade movie. I'm sorry, it is. You think it's just killing vampires. Blade, the original Blade was more than just killing vampires.
Yeah.
But they've got
writing anything that is good is actually hard.
Yes.
People think like there are creatives that make it look easy, but it's actually quite difficult. Any
premise that you think writes itself ends up being the exact opposite by the end of the day.
Yeah,
that's what I've learned. Because you're thinking of only the premise and you're not thinking of all the supporting elements required to make that premise tangible. Like the first Blade movie, to quickly dash on that, it's about Blade kind of reconciling with his position in the world, his teetering on the edge of actually turning into a full vampire that happens to also still be a day walker, where his serum is no longer working, his urges and his desires and lust for blood is kind of getting the better of him. Will he be able to fight it off? It's a battle of his soul internally. It's still a schlocky movie, but fun, but at least has that. And that's something you have to keep in mind when that's what I was sorely missing from Blade Trinity, because there's nothing like that in Blade Trinity. Blade 2 had a little bit close on, whatever. I don't really want to get into the weeds of that, because that was more about the vampires with the split jaw than it was anything else. That was more of a gimmick, but still fun.
Yeah.
But with Aliens right now, it seems like they settled into the fact that all we need it to be that unstoppable force that's mowing down everybody, and yet the one lone survivor. And has there been a single Alien franchise film where the person that survives at the end is not a woman?
Nope.
Aside from Hicks and Newt, who that was a team, that's probably the only one that works. But primarily, it's always been a woman at the end that survives.
In the first AVP, it was a woman, and I guess in Requiem, it was the dude, it was the guy. But that's it, if you want to count that, because Requiem is not a good film.
No,
but it did. I will say this: Alien versus Predator Requiem is a horrible movie, but it does have some really badass Predator scenes.
And you know what's the weird part is, I'll say this: doing practical effects, doing fight choreography, doing good cinematography, those sadly are the easiest things to get right in a film, because you have way more examples of how to do it right than doing it wrong. Whereas trying to write a script and direct a movie, that's a lot harder, because the good ones are few and far between. Whereas good set pieces, good explosions, good action, good framing, you can find that in vast majority of movies far easier than you can a great movie. And that's why it takes a lot of work. That's why whenever I see the fan films with a huge action fight scene and stuff, I'm like, yeah, great. You managed to nail the one thing that a million other people can nail with a lot of hard work and dedication. And they have a lot of more frame of reference to find to emulate. But you want to try and find a great movie, you've got your AFI's top 100 lists. But if you compare that to the best fight scene lists in movies, which are in the thousands, it's way easier for you to draw on and educate yourself on how to do a good fight scene and how to shoot a good good action scene and frame every your shot than it is to just watch the top 100 best movies of all time and think that you could probably write equal to that, because you have such a smaller pool to draw from. And that's just the point. The larger the pool you have to draw from to educate yourself, to understand how those things work, the easier it is for you to nail. It still takes a long time to nail it, but you have way more ways to draw on it from. Whereas, how many fantastic, memorable movies are there out of all the movies made that you can draw from to try and become a better writer for it? It's a slimmer pool, sadly. And same thing.
Yeah, but aren't the bad ones the most fun to watch?
They can be, absolutely. I mean, again, I know people that have been making movies for 20 years that still make movies like a first-year film student, and it blows my mind that they haven't learned. But when you watch them, I laugh at them for the incompetence and for the effort. And you know, it's the funny part, some of them have really great, excellently done fight scenes. But take a look at something like John Wick, right? The first movie actually had heart and was great. All the other ones, you're just kind of in standby mode watching gun battles. And Keanu Reeves going down 20 flights of stairs and unharmed as a result.
I mean, I feel like that's maybe slightly oversimplifying them, but if you compare them to the first one, I do get your reason.
I'm only comparing to the first one because
if in that comparison, so if we're working in a compare and contrast capacity, I do definitely understand what you're saying. I do. However, it does not diminish my enjoyment of 2, 3, and 4.
Oh no, you can still enjoy them because they're actually really well shot and well choreographed. But
there's some of the best choreographed action movies I've seen in a long time.
It's the dead wife and the dog, and that's the heart that pulls you in.
Absolutely.
And then now that they've got you, it's like, okay, you're good for the rest. But the thing is, they kind of forgot the dead wife and the dog stuff in the subsequent movies. And it's like, well, now you just lost the heart. And now he's going into this bigger world where you're wondering, like, wow, in this world, is there anyone that does not work as a secret assassin or mercenary? Like everybody. The cabbie is going to be a mercenary. Like it's like this is the economy of the John Wick world. And now they're doing a spinoff to it with the ballerina, which has been in the works for a decade. In fact, that screenplay was written the year after John Wick came out.
Did anybody here see the Continental? I haven't yet.
I saw the first 2 episodes and I did not care to even watch the third. It was just
okay. That's unfortunate.
Even with Mel Gibson hamming it up, it was not.
I was curious about the premise because I did like the entire idea of the Continental as a system. I'll probably still end up watching it one of these days if I find the free time to watch something.
It's 3 like movie length episodes. It's kind of like how Sherlock was for the BBC back in the day.
Okay.
Yeah.
You should watch Twisted Metal if you get a chance.
Oh. I have that queued. I haven't checked that out either.
I thought that was a lot of fun. I thought it was much better than Fallout. A lot of people went nuts for Fallout and all this stuff.
I've never been a fan of post-apocalyptic walking simulator personally. So
Twisted Metal doesn't have a whole lot of lore to break, right? So they have more room to play, right? In that one,
that's why. It's probably part of why it was received really well.
Dude, it's the most fun video game show, though. It's balls to the wall insanity at times, but it also has heart, and it also has likable characters and a story that. Because remember, Twisted Metal is just a game about fighting cars. This has to give you a reason why the setting and the world is the way it is, and it does a good job. I mean, I don't want to sound too soft on these things, but I gotta say, Twisted Metal and Ted were 2 solid shows from Peacock. Like
Ted
I really
was actually good. That's been renewed for a 2nd season. So,
dude, I'm pumped. My show Tulsa King's back in like 14 days or something.
Me too. Actually, I'm curious to see how they pull that off because they're going in a slightly different direction than I expected, but I'm not apprehensive by it.
Then we got Only Murders in the Building.
Yep, that one I'm looking forward to because I liked the cliffhanger on season 3 a lot.
I love that show. I wish the audience wanted us to do streams about that.
I'm trying to remember the last show that so there are 2 shows that I watched fairly recently. I actually still need to finish one. So I saw just the first episode of the Knuckles series, and I actually had a lot of fun with that first episode. I need to finish the series. I watched all of the MonsterVerse series. Was it Monarch? and it was okay. It had some really cool ideas. Most of the characters that were in, so it takes place in two different times. It takes place in present day, and it also takes place like decades in the past. So it jumps back and forth. All of the characters from the past, I was really interested in and invested in. Almost all of the characters in the present, I couldn't give less of a shit about. So it was this weird dichotomy for me. But overall, I enjoyed it. It wasn't as anywhere near as good as any of the MonsterVerse films for me.
Well, it's got Kurt Russell, so it's going to get an automatic pass from me.
Kurt Russell's character was fantastic in it. He was the best character by far.
Folks, you can't
You can't go wrong with Kurt Russell.
I'm just going to always give it a pass.
Wyatt trying to play Kurt Russell because he tries. I think Wyatt should try and stick to being Wyatt Russell, personally.
Yeah,
there was a reason they did that in the show.
Oh, absolutely. It's actually the only reason Kurt Russell agreed to do it is because it worked. He saw how it worked. But I'm like, Wyatt's also 7 inches taller than you, Kurt.
Well, they didn't ever have to have him next to each other, and they also didn't have to have either of them next to the same characters that they were next to in either of their times. So I get what you're saying.
No, I'm just making a joke there. Yeah.
they were able to skirt that as an issue.
Script, random question. Who's a better nepotism actor, Jack Quaid or Kurt Russell's kid?
Better actor or just better at nepotism? Because Jack Quaid
better actor, like an actual entertaining actor.
God.
I won't lie. I actually really like Wyatt Russell.
Yeah, I mean,
I think he's solid. He's not amazing, but he's solid.
Wyatt sticks to the simple rules, which makes me want to see him do something that's not related to what his dad has done. Like even when he was in Falcon,
right? Like test himself a little bit.
He was okay in Falcon and the Winter Soldier because he was not trying to play his dad or any of the John Wayne that Kurt Russell is known to emulate. However, Jack Quaid, he's in way more stuff than he should be.
What have I seen him in?
It's Huey from The Boys.
He's in Huey from The Boys. He's in Star Trek Lower Decks. He's in a couple of other.
He's Superman.
Oh yeah, he's the voice of Superman in My Adventures with Superman.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
It's not terrible, but it's not great either. He's one of the Peter Parkers in Across the Spider-Verse. He's the voice in Solar Opposites, which is another television show. He's in a bunch of stuff. He's in the Novocaine, which I heard is actually a really good script, but he's the main character in that. Unfortunately, he's also in a movie called Companion, which is in post-production, which I remember being finished shooting just last fall. He's in Heads of State, which I think is a legacy film to a Dennis Quaid movie, but I'm not 100% sure. He was in Oppenheimer.
Oh gosh, his face is super familiar. I haven't seen it.
It looks like what happens if Meg Ryan got hit in the face with a shovel and then did a gender trans.
That's a ridiculously accurate description, but I was about to say I haven't seen any of the things that you've listed off in the last 45 seconds for Jack Quaid productions, but I know his face. Like I'm looking at his face right now on Google, and I'm like, what?
You've kind of seen it everywhere. And you're like, why?
Yeah, what the hell have I seen you in? I know I've seen you in something. I guess none of it was memorable enough for me.
He's a one-note actor.
Okay.
The thing is, he
Dennis Quaid is incredible.
Dennis Quaid was incredible. Now I think the only good performance he's had as an opportunity is the Reagan movie, which I'm looking forward to seeing.
Well, the last thing that I saw Dennis Quaid in was
Don't You Dare Say the Day After Tomorrow.
No, it was not. It was oh my gosh.
Point?
Hold on. No. It was it's on the tip of my tongue. He was the coach of a cross country team. Oh gosh, this is bugging the crap out of me that I can't remember this right now. Oh my God, he wound up playing a transferred coach of a cross country team, and it was such a good movie.
Hill? No.
Oh my gosh,
this is
just look it up and while you look it up, let me read Shrubble's 08's message.
Please do.
The Acolyte failed due to a lack of jammering I'll take a Jamaram and a you're fired. Well, here's your Jamaram.
Jamaram.
Shrubbles08, would you like to pick something besides you're fired? Because we get copy strikes on that one. So I'd like to hook you up with something else. While you wait, here's an extra one.
Oh, Bob, say it!
There you go. Go, Bob.
That's what it was. Yes, it was McFarlane. That is, as a cross-country runner, a former varsity cross-country runner myself, that movie was fantastic.
I
genuinely
have never
good
seen
movie.
it.
If you aren't the type of person to watch sports films, I totally understand if it's not your bag. But if you do enjoy sports films, like not just funny ones, but like ones that have some real heart to them, you know, talking about like, you know, Miracle or
That's a great movie.
Rudy, stuff like that. Like McFarlane is that movie. It's that type of film. And I don't normally give much of a crap about sports films outside of the ones I mentioned and maybe a couple of others, unless it's something that's just kind of like fun and funny, like The Replacements.
I was going to ask you how you felt about Happy Gilmore, but
Happy Gilmore's fine. Happy Gilmore's fine. I'm not a gigantic Adam Sandler fan, is the thing. Like
I used to be.
I've seen a handful of his movies. I've seen Happy Gilmore. I've seen 50 First Dates. I've seen Little
Waterboy is
Nicky.
another good sports
I've
movie.
seen Waterboy. I've seen Little Nicky. I've seen I know there are a few more that I've seen, but like
at least you've seen Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, unlike Blabs from the Side Scrollers podcast.
I've seen a lot of Arnold Schwarzenegger films. Like I grew up watching most of his action films, probably seeing them when I was younger than
you should have been.
Probably, yeah. Like I was 8 when I saw The Running Man.
It's a good ass movie, though.
It is a good ass movie, and I was probably 9 or maybe 10 when I saw the original Total Recall. So, like,
that's the right age.
Yeah,
I've watched a lot of Arnold movies.
Well, let's keep things rolling. Let's
do it.
The eye on screen right here. But here's the
I see Luke Skywalker in the foreground, and I see the Joker in the background.
Well, here you go, real quick. This is for Shrubbles08.
Message!
Terminator 2 is a great movie. So, folks, right here on screen, we have our old pal, Mark Hamill. Now, Mark Hamill is an interesting character. He is known to be Luke Skywalker, the Joker, but more lately, he's been known to be insufferable because he's been doing a couple things that annoy people. He's going on the whole political rant. He did something about the effortless feminism of the original Star Wars movie, which made me shit my pants, metaphorically speaking, of course, because I'm an adult and I don't get upset over things like that. But he also was charging $400 for an autograph, $700 in bulk. I don't know if that was a joke. I assumed it was.
It was 400, 500, and then was it 7 or was it 8?
It was 7.
7? Okay. Yeah, like an insane, absolutely insane amount of money for an autograph.
You know, if people are going to spend that kind of money for Luke Skywalker, and let's be honest, that's what they're buying. Maybe the Joker, but more than likely Luke Skywalker. You know, more power to him for that. But I made a video yesterday talking about good old Mark Hamill. I think the problem with him is he's going to turn himself into a relic of the past, but not a beloved one, because he's remembered for being Luke, and the fans just came off of this campaign to defend Luke Skywalker during the Last Jedi. If he had been insufferable back then, there would have been no Last Jedi campaign from the fans. They would have been like, yeah, we don't care. And so my point I'm getting at is I think if Mark Hamill keeps going down this route after the election's over, people are still going to remember him like this. And so less people are going to show up to go get Luke Skywalker's autograph, therefore hurting him because he's not coming back to play any big iconic roles.
No, I think that Mark Hamill has gone through the Darth Vader change, and that happened. His fall to the dark side occurred when Rian Johnson broke him with what he did with Luke, and with Mark Hamill's a character actor. He's never been a leading man. Character actors have this really strong sense of professionalism where even if they disagree with what they're being asked to do, they will still do it because they don't want to ruin the picture or the project they're on. And they will voice their concerns, and they will always try to nudge and try and get things into the right point. But if the producers or the director or people writing the checks say no, the character actor will be like, you know what? I understand it's a job. It's professional. I am the actor. I am the puppet. I am to perform the way you need me to. But I think what happened with The Last Jedi, because it broke him. And I think doing the film broke him, but I think what broke him further is when he finally saw the film. And there's that classic meme video of Rian Johnson talking, and Mark Hamill just turns to his side to look at Rian Johnson. He just has this death glare on him.
And that was probably an instinctive thing.
And
it was something I don't think he did that consciously.
No, I think that was the last sign of the real Mark Hamill. And after that, because again, all the press leading up to the movie and even the stuff that was repeated afterwards is Mark Hamill defending what Luke Skywalker is supposed to be, what he is, and then saying, but Ryan wanted to go this direction and I wanted to be a professional. This is what I did. I think that broke him. I also think it doesn't help because Mark Hamill's wife is a very controlling woman. I know there's a lot of talk with regards to Mark Hamill wanting his son's girlfriend to terminate a pregnancy. That actually started with his wife first. And because his wife believed that woman was trying to jump into the family through unethical means and exploit them financially, which ended up not being the case. And
I don't mean to be rude, but he's not that famous.
No, true. He's not that famous, but there's enough there that he's more famous than anyone else.
He's played two iconic characters, right? But he's done almost nothing outside of that.
Well, no, he's done lots of stuff outside of that that's never resonated with audiences. Big difference.
That's what I'm getting at. Yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
The thing is, like, he's been a constantly working actor, mostly in the voice side of things, because that's where he excels in. But again, you have from Hollywood perspective, and this happens actually a lot, where a child of a celebrity hooks up with a girl. The girl claims she's pregnant, and the reason that she's there and making that statement is because she wants a ton of money. So that is a known issue that happens.
Sure.
The understanding
that's a valid position to come from.
Right. It's understanding that Mark's wife felt that this was one of those situations. The reality turned out not to be the case. What ends up happening, Mark Hamill actually spends a great deal of time with his granddaughter, loves her to death. They have a great relationship. Yeah. The other part too is he's also deep within the Hollywood world. He lives in LA. He is surrounded by people of only one opinion. He's been barraged and criticized for being a legitimate geek because he made a movie called Comic Book the Movie, which is about authentic to, comic book characters and whatnot. It's got a whole bunch of character actors. He made it out of love. He made it out of passion. That Mark Hamill was, if that Mark Hamill saw the Mark Hamill today, he would be like, what the hell happened to you? And he would criticize him. But that Mark Hamill doesn't exist anymore. He is gone. And he is not surrounded by anyone, even I think maybe because Chelsea Hamill's his youngest daughter, she probably, I think, also went off the edge. I used to cross paths with her years ago, very, very, very loosely. Like she'd be in the same room. We'd all say hi. She'd do her own thing. I do my own thing. I didn't care. Because it's always weird when you try to like get in to meet a celebrity through their kids because they always get apprehensive by that. And I don't
and that's not an unreasonable concern to have.
The other part too is Mark Hamill. He's mixed because if you stop him on the street and ask him to sign something, he will stop and sign it too. And his wife and his family will tell him stop it because they're not actually wanting you to sign it for them. They want to sell it on eBay, but he doesn't care because he doesn't want to make that risk of, I don't want to say no to anyone that approaches me to sign something of theirs because I don't want to be that guy. And yet when he goes to these conventions and he says something like to MAGA, go force yourself. I don't understand. I mean, I understand the contents of the go after yourself type of thing, but it just doesn't feel like it's him. And it also makes me wonder, is there a joke underneath there? I would love to entertain the idea that there's a joke where go force yourself just means may the force be with you and push forward if you wanted to, but I don't know if he's actually doing it that way or not, because you don't know. He's not the same man anymore.
I think it would be tough to assume something like that.
Exactly.
However, it is super heartbreaking to witness. And I think you're right. There's something now broken inside of him. And
Because you
that's
can see the change, almost like it's almost a night and day change, and you can date it literally to after
Well,
Carrie Fisher died and after The Last Jedi came out.
you can
Yeah.
look at interviews of him prior to The Last Jedi and prior to Carrie Fisher passing away, and then look at stuff of him now, and there is a change in his countenance. There's a change in his visage. You can, if you're someone that pays close enough attention to the facial expressions, very minor ones, and to people that you're interacting with, there's a very marked change in his countenance and his
Well, the weird
expressions
part
and the way
is
that he interacts with people.
I just can't stop harping on the fact that, like, for decades he kind of knew where he was, kind of like Adam West, where
Yep.
Adam West
Yeah,
had this resurgence thanks to Family Guy. But, like, let's be honest too, most of us growing up, like, in the window of time, I'm talking people about my age, Star Wars wasn't around, and Mark Hamill wasn't a big enough name that, like, everybody geeked out over the Joker being voiced by him. Like, it was a thing where most people were years later, you're like, do you know Luke Skywalker's the Joker? You're like, what? Like, that was a thing back then.
Yep.
yeah, same dude. Yeah.
And I think he used to operate like that, but ever since the Star Wars prequels, or not prequels, but like ever since whatever we're talking about, he like, but the thing is, his place in society hasn't changed, and he's going to burn himself out of the goodwill for people. And, sorry, dude, like, I don't care how often, you go on and quote Star Wars at a press conference. If it's not meant to be sarcastic, just calm down. Like,
well, as a perfect example and segue off of that, not so much a segue as it is a piggyback, like Mary, who's a friend of the channel, Mary Mayhem, she got to meet Mark Hamill and got him to autograph something for her. And she says all the time that she had a wonderful interaction with him. This was in the early 2010s, I want to say. So this was roughly around probably Force Awakens time, if I'm remembering things correctly. And he called her a sweetheart, and they had a great brief interaction. Obviously, they're not going to be able to spend 35 minutes when you got 1.5 billion other people trying to get his autograph. But you eventually, when you do stuff like what he's doing and say stuff like what he's saying, you end up losing even the goodwill and the faith of those people that have these wonderful memories with you.
oh yeah, man,
right?
there's only
Like,
so much
people
elasticity that has.
Exactly, the elasticity of being able to separate art from artist. Like, there's a range with that where people are willing to operate within, and it's going to vary from person to person, but everybody does have that limit. Everybody has that cutoff point where at some point this person whom you looked up to, you loved the character that either they played in live action or they voiced in animation or both, they say or do something that is just either so disrespectful to either you directly or to people who are similar to you, you can no longer then separate art from artists, because there is a point where you can't help but take it personally. And so that taints that memory, that wonderful memory that you had.
Oh
And
yeah,
that's the most heartbreaking part about it. Like, I don't give a crap what literally any Hollywood celebrities' politics are. I really don't. As long as you can act in a respectful manner with me and with people who claim to be your fans.
Well,
That's
you know
it.
what? I can probably guarantee you that if Mark Hamill were sitting alone at a table and a guy came up wearing a MAGA hat, Mark would still treat him with politeness and respect. I don't think he would push him away.
I hope so.
But
And
if there
that's
was other-
entirely
but-
possible. But the
but
problem
if there was
is his
other people
public.
around him. If there was other people around him, like he's at a convention, there's a line to see him. He
Mhm.
doesn't have his handlers. It's just him one-on-one. He's fine. You get a handler in there, maybe that handler will say something like, can you take off the hat, or can you not be here, or something like that nature. And Mark might be in a state where he would let that slide. But if he was on his own, I think 100% he wouldn't care. He would just say, "You're a fan of me. Thank you so much for being here." And we probably
And
wouldn't even bring up
unfortunately, we're in the internet age where we have enough examples now of celebrities, whether it's Mark Hamill or somebody else, acting in that way. Whether that's okay, so a lot of people within Hollywood are to some degree puppets in terms of like if they have a handler, if they have people who are typically trying to tell them what they're allowed to say or what they're supposed to say, that is a thing. However, not every normal person who's just a fan of that actor's work knows anything about any of that, and they don't care anything about any of that. And to be honest, it's not their problem to care about any of that. What matters is the perception of this person that, at least to them, this perception of this person that they looked up to, and that will inevitably get tainted. And that's unfortunate. And it's sad and it's heartbreaking. It shouldn't be that way. But unfortunately, that's the world in which we live.
All I gotta say is I'm having so much fun with Mark Hamill because all it does is give me ammunition for this.
Yeah.
I'm having fun with.
Yes.
I know
Yes!
scripts we talk about
Yes!
stories not writing themselves, dude. I sat down. I was just like, all right, outline, brr, and now I'm like,
Give us
story.
Stealing Solo 2 now.
Honestly, if I can keep it at this pace, you'll have it by the end of the year. So
Wow.
like,
Okay, I was going to be
that's-
like, hey, if I can have my Q1, Q2 next year,
no,
I'll be thrilled.
I'm not cutting corners and I'm not cutting anything out on YouTube. But like, you guys don't draw, but you write, so you get it. But like,
Yeah.
you ever get inspired?
I can't draw
where
for
you're
shit.
Like, well, you ever get inspired? We're like, oh, I'm going to keep writing. I'm going to keep writing. I'm going to keep writing.
Yeah, I
have
banged
just
out a
been, like,
135-page script in less than a month.
Yeah, I'm just kind of like in this mode where it's like, oh, if you put something that's a writing utensil in my hand, I just been drawing like crazy. I filled up paper, iPad, you name it. I'm just sitting here. I've been studying Neil Adams and Jim Lee for like a week. But that's irrelevant. My point is, I pay attention to all this Mark Hamill stuff. And I know a lot of people want to get angry and make like, response videos. And I made a video making fun of the stuff. But like, I want people to know, like, I've been studying Mark Hamill and how he's been acting lately. And I'm going to be making fun of him like no one else can. But I do think Mark Hamill, like you say, which I think it was Script that said it, like if you caught him alone, he'd probably be pretty cordial. I don't, if I ever met him, like I wouldn't want to run up to him and start yelling about this shit. I'd think to myself, how do I want to remember this? Probably bring up the book. But my point is, like, I don't really want I just wish Mark Hamill wouldn't be so tainted. I kind of like, the old Mark Hamill, the king of the nerds, Mark Hamill. I don't know what he's benefiting from this. Like, I could understand if it was like, not that I approve it, but I could understand if somebody was doing something because it's, oh, I'm going to get new work. All of his iconic roles are dried up, and I know he works all the time. I've seen a lot of his stuff.
I mean, he said he's never doing Joker again now that Kevin Conroy passed.
Yep, that's true.
Yeah.
And
that's good, though.
If he adheres to that, I respect that.
I think he will.
And I will always hold him as the most iconic Joker. He's actually not my favorite Joker, but he's the most iconic one, and probably the best one.
You're not coming back next week.
No, it's not. No, I actually
Beautiful
like Troy
work.
Baker's just a teeny bit more.
Did you
in,
see that
Arkham
Indiana
Origins.
Jones trailer with Troy Baker?
No, I didn't, because
Yeah, it
I
just came
didn't.
out
I
today.
didn't give a crap about that game, so I haven't watched anything on it.
I've never seen anything that looks like digital Harrison Ford. Like, this looks so real. I'm like, oh man, shit. Look, I got Game Pass. I'm gonna get it for free, so I don't have to spend money.
Oh,
on it.
there you go.
Well,
I guess.
I'll put it this way. I think that Mark Hamill can be saved by his fans. If enough people take a couple minutes to be with him, be like, we love you, we miss you. What he's doing right now, he's employed technically by the DNC. They are paying him to speak at these events. He is doing his job in that regard. Again, even if he's trying to find some of the stuff that his kids post of him on social media, a great example I brought up earlier. There's TMZ footage of Mark in his SUV in the back seat and people shoving DVDs, books, and stuff for him to sign. And then it cuts to him at home, and his wife and his daughter, his wife and his son are complaining that he shouldn't be stopping to sign those things. And he's like, but I can't help it. I have to do it. And it's like, that feels like it's a little bit of the real Mark Hamill showing through, and you can see the people around him that's trying to suppress that. And it's like, you don't need to take him away from his family. You just kind of have to get that part back again. And I think the best way to do that is, if you are fortunate enough to meet him in person, say hi, say how much you love him, say, don't have to talk about the politics and stuff, but be like, I miss seeing you doing more of the geek related stuff, because that's where you save him. You don't, if you try to attack him at saying he's politically incorrect or all this stuff, not on your side, don't try and get actors on your side politically. That's stupid. Just don't even bring it in there. But appeal to the humanity, appeal to the thing that made them popular and made them beloved by you. That will get them out of, or at least pull them away further away from the political tainting that has occurred to some of these celebrities. And eventually they will come back for redemption. Eventually they will. Because I would not be surprised if, in the next 4 to 8 years, Mark's able to actually have this tell-all book about how much he had a problem with what Disney was doing with him, how they were holding certain powers over him. Because again, Mark Hamill, character actor, doing well, gets a big opportunity to come back, play a role that he cherished a great deal, didn't like what was happening for it, spoke out, and then all of a sudden stopped speaking out. Why? Disney did something to him. It broke him, threatened him, whatever. But he never made any complaints later on about The Last Jedi ever again. And Disney is very much a political company now. Mark Hamill's not technically employed by them at this moment, but there's always the potential that he will be asked to return to voice a role of, or do a digital de-aging of Luke Skywalker. And there's probably conditions from previous agreements that say, hey, you got to adhere to our branding in public if you want to come back. And I guarantee you they're holding his perception of the fandom a hostage to do that, because it's like, listen, if you don't come back, the fans are going to be really disappointed in you. And I've seen
already disappointed in him.
The thing is, he doesn't know that. That's the problem. And they've done everything they can to keep that from him. I guarantee you. So yeah, even if they already are disappointed in him, he doesn't know about it. And he's still thinking about the ones that aren't disappointed in him. He's like, I don't want to disappoint those people. And he will say all the things that are probably against what he wants, or maybe they are part of what he wants. We don't know for sure, but he will say what he's told to say in order to be that professional and do what he thinks is best for himself and for what he thinks the Star Wars fandom is today. He might have no idea how divisive Star Wars fans actually are. He might just be getting the selected troll messages being sent his way through the filter, being told, hey, these aren't Star Wars fans because they're saying these horrible things. And he'd be like, yeah, horrible things. Star Wars fans don't say horrible things. No, they must be trolls. So yeah, very, very logical arguments. There's a lot of precautions and protections being done to any type of celebrity at any level, because their egos are fragile and it's part of a way to control them. I mean, look at Michael Jackson. The guy lost his childhood, tried to recreate it, tried to do everything above board, but it was still perceived as creepy, was exploited by people who wanted to, take advantage of that. He got paranoid, isolated, and then he also got taken advantage of by people that are supposed to have taken care of him. And apparently it looks like similar things are happening to Matthew Perry with recent news that's been released, that mishandlings were being done with regards to medications he was being given. So yeah, there's definitely a culture on the acting side of things where there's protections in place, not to protect the public from the actor, but to protect the people that control that actor for their own jobs and for their own financial security. And Mark Hamill may be among that. Heck, there was tons of reports of elder abuse for Stan Lee, and there was a legal battle over it. If you think that's not happening to guys like Mark Hamill and other celebrities in other ages, I've got a bridge to Baltimore to sell you, because it's happening. And it's a cottage industry out there. And there's some people that are able to overcome it. And then there are some that can't. You just got to wait and see which side perseveres on a case-by-case basis with each celebrity and each crazy person.
Yeah, I'm still going to root for Mark Hamill to have a Darth Vader moment where he comes out of it,
I hope he does.
And
Script might be right in that it's going to take fans that are on our side of the aisle, which is anything, to the right of Mao and Trotsky, and, say, hey, man, like, I love your work. I grew up with you as Luke Skywalker. I grew up with you, voicing the Joker. You played an incredibly important role in my childhood and my upbringing. I'd really love that you'd focus more on that than all this other nonsense. Like the work that you have produced in your professional career serves as an escape from all this other stuff in the real world. I'd rather you focus more on that rather than all of this real world crap.
Well, like Script said, he's hired by him, so I mean,
he's hired by him. The other part too is fictional characters do influence the real world. They inspire people to do good, and he is in a position where he has got enough people around him saying, if Luke Skywalker comes out in support of this person, that will be good for the world. The argument for that is probably very weak, but just barely enough to convince an actor. And for your average Joe person, it could probably convince them too. You never know. But for people with a bit more experience, with a bit more understanding of things, I think it'd be a harder argument to make. But again, actors, they dedicate their entire life to being able to adopt other personalities, other traits, and try and do them so well that they convince you they're another character. And that comes with a sacrifice of their own personal identity. It really does. That there's the reason the psychology business is huge in California. A lot of actors go there to try and refine themselves after they've thrown themselves into a war, whether it's the method that they've incorporated or just a strict form of commitment in order to maintain that job. In some cases, especially people who have been doing roles in soap operas where they're like, you play the character so many years, so many decades that you don't know where you end and the character begins, and vice versa. I mean, that's a very that's a very troubling situation to be in. So, I mean, actors are not as in control of who they are as you want to think they are, and that's the other part to consider. But again, there's always hope. There's always a chance you have that watershed moment. It'd be fantastic to see Mark Hamill on stage, and he just throws the mic before him. He says, you know what? Screw this political stuff. I'm a Jedi like my father before me, and just walks off stage. It'd be great.
I mean, he'd win everybody back in one sentence with that.
Yeah, he really would. But I don't even think it would take anything that grand of an ostentation of a gesture. If he could just stop talking so like hyper polarizingly political, just focus on the work that you've done that has meant so much to so many people. Like,
well, I think I don't want to come off as punching down, but I think you're over-aggrandizing his actual work. It's just like two things he's done 30 years
right,
apart.
But those have meant a lot to people. Is the thing, like, dude, especially Luke.
You're talking to me of all people. Like, believe me, I know how much they mean. I think he should realize how lucky he is to still be this relevant.
Sure.
Like, he's not
and look, I'm someone that I don't even actually give a shit about the Skywalkers. The Skywalkers are like the least interesting thing in Star Wars to me.
I know Han Solo's better.
I don't act. Yeah, when it comes to the original trilogy, I was a Han guy. Right, I was far more interested in Han, even though I loved like the Jedi conceptually. I loved the lightsabers, loved the Force, all of that. Like, just as a character, Han was more interesting. I know that Luke was supposed to be kind of the vehicle. That was the hero's journey that we were witnessing and all of that. And I acknowledge that. But Han was more fun to me.
Oh, hell yeah.
There are so many more Jedi characters that I like way beyond Luke Skywalker. Like, I don't care about the Skywalker family bloodline really at all.
Now, when it comes to Star Wars characters, I do love Luke Skywalker. I just was like, it's not like we're picking an actor who has like a really great filmography. It's like, oh man, remember Mark Hamill in The Guyver?
No. Remember him in the Village of the Damned remake with Christopher Reeve?
Oh, from like 95?
I think it was like earlier than that.
Oh yeah, it had to be because of his accident. Shit, excuse me. Yeah, I actually do like Mark Hamill in this movie called Body Bags. It's an anthology directed by John Carpenter. It's a TV show, excuse me. It's not a movie. It was awesome.
he's in a really bad movie called Starhawks, I think, where like these kids are possessed by aliens and he gets into a spaceship and he shoots lasers with it. It's so weird.
I need to watch it just because it's bad.
Yeah.
Actually, I just want to watch it because it's Mark Hamill, to be honest. I'm just like, oh, I'll give it a shot. He's in some stupid airplane movie where he like plays a airport administrator, and I even watched that because I was like, oh man, it's Mark Hamill. Sweet. Like,
Yeah,
my
could be
favorite
fun.
joke in Jay & Silent Bob Strikes Back is, hey kids, it's Mark Hamill. Applause.
And you know what? He was right. Because I was in the theaters when I saw that, and people did applaud right as they saw the sign.
I love that movie. I know Kevin Smith ruined it for everybody, but God, I love Jay & Silent Bob.
No, that's
Jack
a really
White,
well made film.
dude, the View Askew universe is still kind of impressive. You know, coming from what it was, $27,000 to make Clerks, and then, you know, now it's kind of crappy, but he made it. So,
I mean, Clerks 3 was bittersweet, but it does have a good ending because Kevin Smith actually thanks his fans and says that they're the best thing that made his career. And it's a really heartfelt, true thing. It's probably the most honest thing he's said in a long time. And I was
one of the things that he says about current comic book movie adaptations is
he's another guy who his life has changed literally after that heart attack, because he was arrogant and fun, didn't care. His daughter would make fun of him for his eating habits and his political point of views. Then he has the heart attack and he's told by a doctor, yeah, your eating habits are terrible. And he's like, well, if my eating habits are bad and I'm not exercising, maybe everything else I thought was bad. And he completely changed himself from the guy that, you know, was in touch with the geek world to someone who's just so grateful to still be alive that he is going to appreciate everything and just toe the line because he feels like he's got a second chance. And he's got a perspective that he appreciates life so much that he actually is terrified to lose it or risk losing it again early.
you know, that kind of stuff's admirable, but
that's a healthy frame of mind, I would think, at least to a degree. But
he's in the wrong environment that's taking advantage of that.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't have to become a nutcase over that at all and produce piss poor quality work.
Well, you don't like yoga hosers?
Yoga hosers is still very much of Kevin Smith's style. The thing is that the argument that he was given by Netflix with regards to his He-Man stuff, it is unfortunately a very factual argument where if they're looking at it on a purely numbers basis and they say the amount of people complaining versus the amount of people watching is not something that they're worried about, then Kevin has now been given a new justification to actually not worry about those things. And that has corrupted him as well. Because the fact of the matter is you kind of have to entertain the criticism, and you, especially Kevin Smith, who's been around long enough and is also from that area, he can discern which is helpful and which is just a troll. And when he's told by a company like Netflix, which is not a studio, but it's a tech company pretending to be a studio, you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. That gives you a free pass to ignore everything that can make you a better creator as you go one by one. Because listen, there's always going to be trolls. You'll figure out what they are, but you never know. There might be something where a person says something that you didn't think of before, and you realize, you know what, I could probably use that information for in the future. That's a good thing. And it's not about valid or invalid. It's basically all criticism is valid, but the stuff that's trolls, that's not criticism. That's a troll. It's a completely different category. You know, if they just say you suck, it's like, well, you can't improve based on that review. Yeah. Like, that's a troll. I'm sorry. That's just a troll. But if you say, hey, you know what? I didn't think Tila should have behaved that way because it felt very different to her character. And I'm missing the inciting incident that took her from point A to point C. Where's point B? I would love to have seen point B so that I could get on board with this. Boom. There's something that any writer can understand and connect to and be like, you know what? If they couldn't see that, it's not their fault for not paying attention. It's my fault for not making that bridge strong enough in my story. And especially if that starts coming up more consistently throughout other people's commentary on the work, that's where you're like, you know what? That's actually a problem. Maybe I should address that in future stories that I tell.
Our friend Jack White sends in 2 messages. I'd like to read those since he's asking a couple questions that are on brand for what we're talking about. Jack first says, that's the situation with Doomcock and Patrick Stewart. Doomcock can't stand to look at Stewart anymore, not in the Next Generation or the X-Men movies.
That's sad for Doomcock.
Is it just because of the newer show?
Probably.
I haven't watched it. I'm not
Probably.
a Star Trek guy.
The cartoon
Here's the thing.
Okay.
I actually had this conversation very briefly on Twitter with some people just a day or two ago, where one individual had mentioned how, because of the state of Star Wars, they had sold off their entire Star Wars collection in like a cheap garage sale or whatever, because the brand had been just irrevocably damaged for them. And to a degree, I understand like being that upset and frustrated and hurt by what has been done to these properties that we love, that we grew up with, that were kind of formative for some of us, as individuals. But at the same time, I pushed back a little bit on it and said, it is absolutely valid to be frustrated and pissed off, and hurt even, by what the current IP holders for these properties have done to the things that we love, things that we grew up with, things that help shape who we are, things that, shape how we view storytelling and character and all of that. But I think we're giving them far too much power over ourselves and over our memories. If we allow it to get to the point where we say, I can't even look at Star Wars anymore, I can't even look at Marvel or DC anymore. No, just don't give the new shit a dime or your time of day. Like if that's how you feel, and I would empathize with you there, because that's where I'm at with the current crap, because that's all they're putting out, which is crap for the most part, with very few exceptions. However, I refuse
talking about the stuff that just got canceled, Andrew.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not wrong.
Yeah, no, however, I refuse to give them that power over the things that were genuinely good and that I loved. They had no part in the creation of those things that were good. Therefore, they do not have the power or ability to take those away from me. They didn't create any of the great EU comic books, video games, novels, or whatever for Star Wars, or the first 6 films. You have issues with the prequels, fair enough, fine, whatever. I like the first 6 films, despite issues with some of them. But they don't have any hand in the creation of those things. Therefore, what they are creating right now, the dog water they're putting out right now, has zero bearing or effect on my enjoyment and love for those things that came before. Don't give them that power. They only get that power if you give that to them. I'm not getting rid of my DC and my Marvel and my Star Wars stuff. I still have a bunch of Old Republic stuff. I still have stuff from, the prequels and the OT. I still have stuff from Marvel and DC from before, like 2016, and even some of the good DC stuff that was coming out after that.
Well, you can tell us all about that in just a second. Our pal Jack White dropped a massive super chat. And folks, it is time to check in with your favorite professor, Scott Steiner.
They say all men are created equal, but you look at me and you look at Small Joe, and you can see that statement is not true. See, normally if you go one-on-one with another wrestler, you got a 50-50 chance of winning. But I'm a genetic freak, and I'm not normal. So you got a 25% at best at beating me. And then you add Kurt Angle to the mix, your chances of winning drastically go down. See, the 3-way at sacrifice, you got a 33 1/3 chance of winning. But I got a 66 2/3 chance of winning, because Kurt Angle knows he can't beat me, and he's not even going to try. So, Samoa Joe, you take your 33 1/3 chance minus my 25% chance, and you got an 8 1/3 chance of winning at sacrifice. But then you take my 75% chance of winning, if we used to go one-on-one, and then add 66 2/3%, I got a 141 2/3 chance of winning at sacrifice. See, Joe, the numbers don't lie, and they spell disaster for you and sacrifice.
Thank you to our pal Jack White for your super generous Scott Steiner size super chat, my friend. Thank you, Jack says. It's because of the horrible things Stewart has said politically. That's why Doomcock can't stand him anymore. And he can't stand to look at the next generation actors, as well as one of them said something very nasty after the snowstorm that happened in Texas. I did not catch any of that, Jack. Full transparency, I do like Star Trek, but I like the original series. So there's only William Shatner and
Walter
Koenig
Koenig.
still left, right?
Yep.
See, I'm far more familiar with Next Generation, but I don't remember hearing anything from any of the actors from that series in terms of the snowstorm back in, what was it, 2021? Was when we had the big one. We had a second follow-up one the following year that wasn't as bad, but it was still like, wow, that was really cold for Texas anyway. Where I was at in
what is
Austin.
that temperature? Because like I'm used to living in Michigan, where
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's a little different. No, that's actual cold, but like Texas cold, like when it drops into like the teens, we're like, it's that GIF or a meme
You go from
from.
shorts to pants, like.
Well, no, all right,
'Cause that's what it is up
Fahrenheit, jackass, not. Listen, but for
Even
real,
in
it was.
Fahrenheit for Canada. That's nothing.
Okay, but it's different when you're used to it.
Yeah.
I'm also originally from upstate New York, so we get far colder winters there than anything in Texas typically. However, it's been a while since I lived there. So now in the state that I live in now, it's like if temperatures drop that low, you're like, well, that's weird. Like it doesn't usually get that cold here. You know, it's not so much to me personally that I'm like, wow, it's extremely cold just generally. It's like, wow, that's cold for Texas, right? Type of a thing. But I don't recall any of the actors from TNG saying anything about the Texas incident. I'm not saying that one of them didn't. I don't actually care. I still enjoy that show, and I don't let what present day person's words say affect what past versions of themselves did in a piece of media that I enjoy.
Well, Jack has a follow-up. It says basically she said that voting has consequences, and Doomcock lives in Texas, so I can't blame him. And the new series recommendation was Story of Wand and Sword. I'll get back to that in just a second. So I guess it's Marina Sirtis. Isn't that the only lady actor from the Next Generation?
Well, I mean, there's Denise Crosby, but she doesn't speak out much in regards to that because she's more of a director these days. But no, I remember that. I mean, listen, objectively speaking, there's nothing wrong with saying that elections and voting has consequences because, you know, that is why it's important to go out and vote.
It's fact.
That's basically it.
It is a fact.
The other part too is that, I mean, Texas is kind of a mix. It's mostly a purple state, from my understanding. It's like there's definitely a lot of red areas, but there's also a fair amount of blue areas that are densely enough that it kind of balances things out almost.
The major cities, your San Antonio, your Dallas, your Austin, are blue or purple at most. And then everything else is red. Which is how most large states are, but we don't want to get too political here.
That kind of stuff's fine.
Generally, that's how Texas has been.
I'll put it this way when it comes to celebrities. If what they say out of character affects you negatively, it means that they did a really good job while they're in character. And if you don't understand that's what their job is, and you try to think that they are supposed to live their lives as the characters they portray, I don't want that because Kevin Bacon has played a rapist way too many times. I don't know. Just that's a you problem. Like not you particularly, Jack Wright, but just in general terms. If you cannot disassociate a celebrity of who they are as a person versus the characters they play, that is a you problem because they're not supposed to be those characters.
Yeah.
Their job is to convince you on the screen that they are these types of characters that can inspire you and encourage you. And that is all that they had to do. And if they've done that, they have done their job. And that's all you have to hold on to. But again, just to see them on the street and see them in person and to expect them to be the same people that you saw on TV or on the movie screen, that's an arrogance aspect. I mean, that's just an arrogant aspect at the expense of their ability to convince you that they were that person. It's a part of our childhood too. As a result, whether we see them for the first time as adults and are enthralled by their character or not, it's just an innate part of our childhood. When we see that first impression, we grasp onto that. We want to hold on to that. We want that impression to be true. And it's our own human nature. Everybody has it. Even I have it. Sometimes I see a character that I'm like, oh man, that's a really good actor. I really hope he's like that in person. Then I have to check myself and be like, well, that's an arrogant thing for me to view, because I know that they're likely not like that in person. So I got to completely separate that all the time. And that's just the way it is. And sometimes you get lucky. Sometimes the person that plays a great guy on a show or a great gal on a show is a great person in person. But those are between, and it's not something that you have to go out there and expect. And unfortunately, I'm sorry, but celebrities don't owe you to be the hero or the villain they played on screen. They don't. It doesn't work in the same way as it does in the theater, where your ticket pays their salary. They're already paid way beforehand by someone else that took out a loan. You, as the audience member, are supporting that project that they're in. Whether it succeeds or fails, they still got paid. They did their job. And if they get another role, that comes as a different aspect of things, which is it has to do with how they showed up to that performance afterwards, not beforehand. So, I mean, William Shatner did a thing on Twitter. It caused some controversy, but he's 100% right. The fans did not make William Shatner bankable. Him working constantly in projects that fans liked, that he was already paid long before they spent $1 on, made him bankable. Like, he already got his money. The fact that it was a success, and he's been in a lot of failures too, immaterial to him. He did the work. He got paid up front. He technically doesn't really see a fan's dollar before the show. And he doesn't really see much of it afterwards, because he doesn't have many back-end deals on anything he does. That's not how he operated. But it's just the way the economy works on talent. Now, when it comes to independent people who do, pre-orders like you was at Rippaverse, crowdfunding and stuff like that, yeah, you need that money first, because you're pitching them an idea. You hope they like it. You are very much dependent on them. And there's nothing wrong with that relationship. That's how that relationship works. That's the deal that you go into with yourself and the customer. But with talent, remember, they're an employee at a bigger corporation that you are not buying from. It's like saying, to the guy that paints cars at Ford back in the 70s, where you, as the Ford buyer, like, I pay your salary. No, technically you don't. The investors of Ford pay his salaries. He paints the car. That car is sold. The company keeps all that money, and they use that money as collateral to get more investments, which pay the salaries of their person. And you feel like there's a symbiotic relationship to it, but it's not really, because even if that car doesn't sell well, that guy's not going to lose a job because his job is just to paint the car. That's it. And that's the case. Now, if there was something more intimate where, yes, if that person screwed up and that screw up cost them sales, that would be a direct correlation between that person's job and that customer. And therefore, yes, they would be fired, or there'd be changes would be made. But in Hollywood, it doesn't work that way. And in some corporations, especially big ones, it also doesn't work that way. There are other revenue streams that come in. In some cases, sometimes the product that they sell is not even what makes the money. It's the advertisement that product brings as a result that makes the money. And it's a weird economic dynamic that even I have a trouble getting my head around.
Thank you, Jack. There's more from Jack. He says that I think Doomcock's view on this and the fans made you, and if you go around saying nasty things to the fans and show no gratitude to them, then they don't deserve respect. Well, Jack, I got to say, I look at the Rock mentality. I know a lot of people are pissed about the stuff with Hawaii. It's fine. But that dude seems to actually live the mentality you're talking about, Jack, where it's like, people and the whole gimmick and all that crap. And it's cool. I mean, I think what works with him is because he's not just an actor, but he's this wrestler, and he's trying to do all these other things. And let's be honest, as a big fan of his, not everything's that great. So you got to have this like goodwill with people. And I do believe a guy like that lives it. And some people out there do, but there's a lot of arrogance as well. And, people are people. I think everyone should treat each other with this universal respect thing. So, if you held the door for Meryl Streep, she shouldn't point her nose up and go, "Oh, you should, because I was in, the witches of Eastwick. It's like, no, that's not how it works. And it's not like, vice versa either. So I don't get why people just have an arrogance and a douchiness about them. Oh, you had bad time, or oh, you got some garbage. Oh, you got, you get anxiety or something in public. Okay, that's fine, that's possible, but don't make up stuff to just not look at people. I mean, I just think everyone should respect each other is the end of it for me, really. Jack White, thank you again. He says, did you guys see the announcements at Gamescom that were made today? And have you checked out any more of the series recommendations I sent you? I told you I watched the Apothecary guy on Crunchyroll. I watched that one that night. Like, I watched that one because I enjoyed it. So thank you, Jack. I do watch your recommendations. Sometimes it takes me a minute, but I do watch them. I haven't watched any anime lately, so I need to catch up with just watching some stuff.
I'm super behind on my anime, both on rewatches and new stuff.
I don't really get how anime is released, and I know this is stupid to say out loud, but like, like you'll get like the simul releases, or it's coming out in Japan on this day or that. Like, I am still of the era where it either just showed up done, or they released it like a TV show. I'm not used to catching up on anime like as it comes out, like new. I'm kind of
well, I wait for it to be in dub because I don't watch in sub if I can avoid it. Because I like to sometimes watch anime if I'm multitasking and doing other things. I want to be able to at least still hear and understand what's going on.
Yeah, of course. I had something on Netflix the other day, and it was like Swedish, and I was like, "Oh, great! I'm not gonna watch this." And then I looked at it, and it goes English dub. But script, I don't know if this is real yet in the industry. I could swear that it was dubbed by AI. Like,
they've already been experimenting with it. Yep.
Okay, because it was on Netflix, and I'm just like, does Netflix do that? Because it sounded like inhuman. It just didn't have the same cadence that a normal human being would have.
Okay. Two things with that. The first part is that if you try to do proper translations of Japanese dialogue into English, it doesn't sound human anyways. If you want to see a great example of that, there is a Power Rangers series that has like it has like a floating turtle island, and maybe it's like Wildstorm or something. I can't remember, but some of those scripts were written by a guy who was fluent in Japanese, and a person did a literal Japanese to English translation, and the dialogue is atrocious. And it's performed robotically because there's just so much difference between those two languages that you need to have a little bit of a localization to give it a bit more context in life. The other part too is Netflix, as a tech company, they've been experimenting with AI where they can take the original voice actor from Japan and use that voice to basically have it artificially redubbed in English. So it's like that actor is speaking in English, but he's never spoken English before. It's just a computer using the vocal octave.
Right. He's using the program is using his cadence and his pitch and all of that to create it in
voice and pitch to put it in. Yeah. Because the cadence is something that the actor puts in to it.
That's pretty wild that we're at that point, to be honest.
No, I've seen it happen already. They did old World War II press releases of various dictators of that period that were translated in English with the authentic voice of the original speaker, and it's creepy.
That's crazy. We're going to reach a really disturbing point in AI technology.
I think we're there, and it's just not public yet.
I think it's going to burn itself out a lot sooner than it is going to replace anything. It'll be great for translations. Because that will be useful, because it is actually quite difficult for a majority of people when they want to learn another language to actually be able to learn another language. And that's usually in the late teens between to the 40s is when people want to start learning actual other languages. Kids don't care. Kids would rather just not learn anything. So there's advantage there. There's advantage with regards to polling, data analytics, data collection, marketing, and things of that nature. But it's never going to replace the creative side of things. Although we will get a great oversaturation of people making the attempt of it, it's going to parallel the fan films that we saw once YouTube started taking off. And guess what? There are millions of fan films on there, and almost all of them are not worth talking about. And that and the thing is, and the reason is, it's not for a lack of them trying. I'm always grateful for it, but
Sure, and
if
it's
they
not
were
for a
really
lack of love for the property. It's just people that don't necessarily have a proper understanding of cinematography and story structure and all of this. They just
it's all the
they
things
know
that
that
we-
they love this thing, but they don't know how to. It's kind of like
all- yeah.
vomiting stuff onto a
There is
page.
no technology that can replace talent, skill, and
Yeah. Exactly.
And there's only really been a handful of people that made stuff on YouTube that were able to actually get into making movies as a profession, not dependent on them still operating on YouTube. And that's a very small amount. And that percentage is probably going to be consistent with AI. Because again, if all you're saying is, give me a Star Wars movie where Luke Skywalker isn't a jerk, AI will do that for you, but it won't be comparable to the original trilogy in any way, shape, or form. It might fool some people, but not enough that'll say, you know what, this is the future. It will be a flash in the pan, and then eventually it'll end up becoming, it'll become kind of useless. It'll be like, oh, here's what we're doing. We're using AI to previs now because it can compile it faster than what it is. We've written the script, we pump it into AI, it gives us the previs. We can now change it. We've now done our previs in a weekend as opposed to what's usually a couple of months. Now we can start production a lot faster.
Yeah.
That's a good advantage part. But again, you cannot, a machine that has no ability, and you cannot program imagination, cannot replace imagination. And there will be a time when society will be fed up with the lack of imagination and the lack of inspiring things, and there'll be a coldness in society that the moment somebody comes up with something new and inspiring and fun, people will latch on to it like the last breath of air before you're drowning.
Folks, that's right here. Be on the lookout for all kinds of cool stuff from me. You could start with Ghostbusters. Actually, you can start with Stealing Solo. There's some copies left. It's funny. I finally
get it while it's still available.
I was fulfilling orders today, and there's finally somebody in my neighborhood that bought the book. Like, I've shipped them all over the world, but I'm like, finally, somebody that's local listens to the show. Cool.
How funny.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like, oh yeah, going to Italy, not a big deal. Cincinnati, cool. Thank you though, Jack White. The only thing I saw from Gamescom today that interested me though was Indy, because I got Game Pass. I love Indiana Jones. Dial of Destiny was trash, but come on now. God, I just gotta have faith. John Thomas, thank you very much for your generous super chats. John says, here's the thing. Before 2016, I went to the movies almost every week. They accused me of vile things because of my political views. I didn't see a single movie from then until Alita came out. I still hardly see anything. I was the perfect customer. I paid my money. I allowed myself to be entertained. They stole that from me. It isn't different beliefs. It's the vile insults. They always say, don't dump
That's
where
fair.
you eat.
Right, and that's entirely fair. If somebody's directly, attacking and accusing you of pretty abhorrent things,
they're not necessarily accusing you. They're accusing a troll, and they're tricking you deliberately, especially with the media's hand, into thinking that they're talking about you. But again, if you've never said a racist or derogatory thing about anything, you are clearly not on their radar. Because that's, again, they don't cite specific examples, but they do say the generalities. And also think about the context, right? Is this something you're seeing on a press conference? Is it reading it in a trade? Well, what happens what is a journalist doing in modern day? They're manipulating their subjects to get a specific answer out of them to push their own narrative. And actors are very easy to manipulate. So you also have to keep that in mind. Like, what is it? Are they just randomly on the street and they're just saying this out loud? Because that would be a big problem. But are they being massaged to say this by an interviewer? It's like, yo, The Acolyte's the gayest show. Oh, ha, ha, ha. Yeah, is it really? Oh, my God. Geez, that's playing right into a narrative by the journalist, not the showrunner. Now, the showrunner's playing along because they're trying to be diplomatic and favorable. But take a look at who's asking the question first before you start jumping to conclusion. Oh, is this really what they're saying? Or are they just trying to play into what the interviewer is saying so that they can get their talking point, get their article, and move on to the next part? Because that's the other part you have to think of. when you take a look at the vast majority of movies between that time frame of 2016 to 2019, most of them don't say anything about the audience or political views at all. A couple of them do. Guess what company they're from? Starts with a D. Anywhere else?
Discovery?
Nowhere. Yeah. I mean, heck, Brie Larson, when she does that speech, it's not made for you. She's talking about A Wrinkle in Time. And she's talking about trolls that were very upset with it. She wasn't talking about fans of the movie. She wasn't talking about general audiences. But you know what? That speech was not written by her. It was written by a publicist who also happens to work for one of the trades that's also pushing a narrative that audiences, modern audiences, the majority of them are horrible people and they should be ostracized.
That was one of the most incredible times to be a YouTuber. Not to steal your
It really was.
That was, oh my God. That was talk about a time to be alive. You felt alive. Oh my God. John, when I have enough bad experiences with something, I too tend to step away. That's my deal with CM Punk. It's like, I met him at a paid event. He was a douche. Now I'm just like, every time I see him on TV, I'm like,
Very good wrestler.
He's
Very
fine. Like, he's the best. He's not the best at anything, but he's a entertaining package of good wrestling features, good promo skills.
Yeah, great on the mic. He's good in the
intensity.
ring. Yeah.
Yeah, like he's not The Rock. He's not Stone Cold. He's not, in that category. But he's better than he is the Macho Man to John Cena's Hulk Hogan. Like, that is the nicest compliment I'll give CM Punk. Like, of that era, he was the better wrestler. He was the better entertainer. John Cena was just the puppet.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just kind of my thing. John Thomas, again, thank you, John. He says, no, they are directing it towards me. I was on Twitter. Elections have consequences. So to say ignorant things, I'm not giving them the benefit of the doubt.
Wow, you got an interaction from celebrities on Twitter. That's impressive, John. That is. And if they said that too, that's not cool. 100%. But I will say this: most celebrities, they don't care about any people on an individual level, and they don't know about you. And if you were to say, "I hate that person," it's like they're not losing sleep over it because it doesn't get to them to even recognize what it is. Sorry, like John, you're absolutely right to have your anger towards those people that interact with you on Twitter and said those things. But again, celebrities themselves, they don't know. By and large, they don't. And it's sad because if they did, they probably wouldn't act such a way.
Well, I mean, I didn't really befriend any of these people out in California. I interacted with quite a few. Some were cool. Some were weird. Like,
yeah.
God, when you talk about how weird Mark Ruffalo is, I'm like, oh, that's like so-and-so that I knew.
Mark Ruffalo, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess since you mentioned it, I should press the button.
It was kind of bait, yeah.
Well, you know what? I believe it.
Say his name and he appears. I believe in Joe Hendry.
Also, we got this. And this.
Why?
Because
that might be the most atrocious thing I've ever seen on this channel.
That's going to replace the Australian flag soon.
I hope it does.
Oh, wow. That's depressing. I almost feel bad for the Australians. And I say almost because it's hard to really feel bad for a bunch of criminals.
I think Raging Rhino in the chat's going to have to lay some smackdown on you, buddy.
You could try. It's fine.
I just saw him here earlier in the chat. I was like,
if his arms are long enough to reach from behind the bars,
What if his arms were actually long enough to reach from Australia to smack you in the face?
Then I'd have it coming. Then I would absolutely have it coming, and I'd probably give him a tenner or something.
Think of the curve of your arm that you would have to reach you. Because if it's straight, it's just going to boom.
Yeah, if the elbow
at
is
that
like
point,
midway,
I'd be like, you know what? Respect.
Now that might be the dumbest thing that's ever appeared on this channel. Me thinking about Raging Rhino's Mr. Fantastic Arms. Jack
We've
White,
said sillier things.
John, though, I get you, man. That's why I try to operate the way we do here on the channel. Like when we hang out with people, like Overkill 161 came up to Emerald City Comic Con to hang out. Darian 217 makes it to the WrestleMania events. Like that's why I tell you guys, like, come to these things. Enrique in the chat, who's been a member forever, like that's a real life friend too. So come to these events, hang out with us. You get the real us. Jack White says, what I do when I'm multitasking is listen to podcasts, and I make sure that when I'm watching anime is that I'm paying attention to it. I had a window of time where I was like really into podcasts, and so I would listen to podcasts as I played video games, and I would kind of miss out on the experience of the game because I'd be so focused on the podcast. So I had to like break away the multitasking, but I will go on these YouTube rabbit holes, Jack, where I will put like, and they're dumb. It's like, and the history of like Windows NT, not Windows NT, like Windows XP or something, like very basic videos. But I'll go on these rabbit holes as I'm sitting here working on stuff, and I collect the most useless knowledge. It's not even funny. You guys ever go down those rabbit holes where you're like, what am I doing with my life?
Every once in a while when I have to research something new for a story, yeah. Like, why am I researching this? It's just for this mystery. Well, you got to know these details.
So we didn't have, well, we're about the 3-hour mark, so we're not going to go too much longer because it is midnight. Briefly though, script, what's the deal with Sydney Sweeney?
Oh, well, Sydney Sweeney is actually in the crosshairs of Disney, it appears.
Don't ruin her, please.
Well, Disney has ruined every woman they've ever worked with. Look at Lindsay Lohan to Miley Cyrus to
Yes, I know. That's why I said it.
Scarlett Johansson. My Time to Shine, hello, who has probably one of the worst track records of spoilers to date, because almost to the point where I think he's just guessing, or he's participated in a number of focus groups where that's where he gets his information. If it is a he, I don't know, but he's making a claim, and others are sort of backing up that Sydney Sweeney might be cast as Black Cat, which is a very obvious casting, I think, and fair enough.
I feel like that's a super easy casting. Like if Disney themselves were to come out and say, or even Sony, which they won't do obviously because she played Julia Carpenter already in that really bad movie.
Yes. It was so bad it's good, bro. Come on.
It would look. I watched from start to finish solely because of Sydney Sweeney. But if either one of those studios were to come out and say, "Hey, we're casting Sydney Sweeney as Felicia Hardy and Black Cat," I'd be like, "Yeah, I buy that. Why not?"
Yeah. Oh, it's very obvious casting. It's not very inventive, but it's very obvious. I would like to say, don't do it, Sydney, because all the goodwill that you've earned up to this point, Disney will destroy by making you say things, do things that are counter to that. However, if James Gunn calls and says, "Hey, would you like to play Dinah Lance, Black Canary?" Do that.
Oh, yes.
Because number one, you're in more revealing costume. Number two, you get a better looking mask.
Body fishnets. Yeah.
And number three, you are in a new franchise that has actual potential to be successful, as opposed to Marvel, which is trying to patch and bandage its current state of affairs.
Right. Something that's been on a massive downtrend, with the sole exception of Deadpool and Wolverine.
Pretty much.
Which has almost piss all to do with the rest of the MCU.
Exactly. And you know what? Again, if she were, I mean, listen, she's probably got a lot of people saying that if that offer comes across, to take it, because again, she would literally be replacing Scarlett Johansson as the sexiest woman in the MCU.
Yep.
Yeah.
Disney would need that, but Disney would destroy her. Yeah. I think she should probably hold out, do her own things, and if she gets a call from Warner Brothers for a role, take that instead, because they will not put you on a press junket to say BS the way that Disney does. Because Disney, when they get a hold of you, they get a hold of you. With Warner Brothers, they don't care. Gal Gadot's gone off and she's done her own press tours. She's been charming. She's also been arrogant. Warner Brothers doesn't care. They're like, just do the job that you need to do. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Have a good day. Go do a Netflix movie that nobody will watch because guess what? Yeah, you have a pretty face. You're not a star. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
you're not. Let her. I would say go to DC. If you want to do the superhero thing, go to DC. You've already done with Marvel. You got by that by the sheer luck that it was Sony and not Disney doing it, because Disney would never have let you go on to SNL and say the stuff that you said the week after it came out. So yeah, that's what I would say. I know fans are going to encourage her, do it, please. We want to see you. Fans, you're wrong. Oh no, it'd be a great casting, but you're wrong. This is not the right time. It's not right the company.
I don't think fans are thinking with their brains right now. Script.
They're not, and I also think it's kind of shocking to assume that Zendaya is going to return for Spider-Man 4. I don't think she is.
Thank God.
I don't know what the
I don't
point
want to see
would be.
Michelle Jones again. She's a boring
no,
character.
I don't need that lame, insufferable, unlikable, very deliberate replacement for Mary Jane Watson in front of my face ever again. And in fact, I'll do you one better. I don't need to see Michelle Jones. I don't need to see Ned. I don't even at this point really want to see Tom Holland back in the role. Replace him. I'm good. Continue along with the story, but replace him.
I just want to
continue along with the street level, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Ground him. Give me a story with Kingpin or some other street level Spidey villains. I don't need any of the crazy stuff anymore.
You should team him up with Daredevil.
I'd be in 100% down for that.
Yep, just make that movie. Have him go up against the Kingpin. Throw in Silver. Like, here's the thing, too. You can tie in a bunch of these characters and do tons and tons of, recognizable Spider-Man characters just without trying to make it a big crossover event or trying to make them seem more important. Like, yeah, you could make Silver Sable the movie, but you shouldn't. You shouldn't. There's nothing you can add to the genre or to the world at large by bringing, was it Smycurnia or whatever, to the big screen. Like, great, you're going to get a woman in a silver costume or a suit of armor shooting guns. It'll look like Underworld, but just a different color outfit, like whoop-de-doo. But you could have her show up as, an international assassin that Spider-Man has to run into. Same with Kraven. You shouldn't have CGI Rhino, but there's no problem with, having Spider-Man fight a man in a Rhino costume as a one-off character for about 5 minutes in a movie.
Mm-hmm.
He's a Goon type of character. You could use Rhino in this. You could reuse Rhino in a Sinister Six movie because he doesn't require a lot of screen time, and he doesn't require a lot of motivation because he's a hired gun essentially.
Yeah,
he's not the biggest. Like, even the 60s Spider-Man cartoon, whenever they did the Rhino episode, it was really thin because all he was doing is robbing banks. Like, that's you can't sustain much of a story.
It's not exactly the deepest of Spidey villains.
Also, too, in their defense, that character was new. Like, he had like 1 or 2 comic books, and that was it before they put him in the cartoon.
Oh, yeah. Scorpion is a bit more of a character that you can put a movie around.
I agree. I really wish we'd get a full Scorpion or a Scorpion movie.
You could do some fun stuff with Matt Gargan.
Technically been done live action yet, I don't think. Like, I think Matt Hagen has been introduced in one of the Spider-Man movies, but never as the guy.
Well, that's the one problem you have. J. Jonah Jameson is a character played for laughs in the movies. He makes the Scorpion. You would have to make, you'd have to change the origin completely. Because you can't do J. Jonah Jameson doing this thing because it's, he's kind of lovable in the movies and they keep the same version around. So you'd have to change up that origin. I think that'd piss off too many people.
Or at least get him involved as like an investment. I mean, the type of character JJ is in the Disney stuff, he's clearly an attempt at a satirical take on Alex Jones. So you could kind of make him invest in a way to stop Spider-Man, and that investment leads to the creation of the Scorpion. And that you can reconcile it that way, where it's not 100% authentic to its actual origin, but it's enough that it doesn't ruin what has been established on screen with the character, but it still retains a little bit of plausibility that, he would take his vast wealth that he has in order to get a scoop and stop Spider-Man and invest in some sort of program where he's told this will stop Spider-Man. And then he finds out there's a little bit of an ulterior motive behind the person who's got this own plan. And and it goes far beyond the moral compass of what JJ is willing to do. And that's also kind of true because JJ has actually done some things that when he finds out how far they go, he's like, that's against what I would do. You've betrayed my trust, and what I stand for, even though he is essentially a tabloid publisher.
Well, yeah, but he does. I do like when J. Jonah Jameson will stand up for other characters in the Bugle or for Peter Parker himself. Like in the first movie, I'm like, at least there's character to that.
Yes.
He's not just a blowhard. But I do think he also is in a conversation as one of Spider-Man's best villains, because I know J. Jonah Jameson isn't technically one, but
he's a propaganda villain. I mean, that's the brilliance of it. It's like he Spider-Man is the only one he really goes after, because how often does he go after Daredevil or Captain America or the X-Men or Avengers? Like,
he loves Captain America.
Yeah.
Because old JJ is a patriot himself.
Or, well, he views himself as a patriot, but the stuff that he's doing is very unpatriotic. I mean,
okay, that's fair.
He's part of the media, and he's trying to push a false narrative on someone who objectively and a sizable portion of New York City recognizes as a hero. Because one of the things I enjoyed in some of the early comics is Spider-Man comes in to save the day, and you're like, okay, are the people going to react like he's a hero, or are they going to believe the tabloids that JJ's pushing? You don't know until it actually happens.
Yeah, that element's been gone for 60 years, because it's only the earlier appearances. But man, that's what makes those books so exciting and fun. Like, folks, if you haven't read old Spider-Man, let me be a nerd for a minute. Read it. It's good. It's not boring. Like, the first appearance of the character is only 15 pages long, and you all know the story of getting bit by the spider, becoming a wrestler, Uncle Ben, all that stuff. That's just the story. That is the one issue. And then the next book, he fights the chameleon and meets the Fantastic Four, and that's okay. And then he meets the Vulture, and then Doc Ock. And it just keeps going from there. So, like, you're never going to get boring issues.
Mm-hmm.
Up next, we have one from our friend Jack White, who says, I do that. I play games when listening to podcasts and commentary. I listen to Sticks and Hammer, Tim Pool, and Viva Fry and the Lotus Eaters while playing games. I've done a lot of commentaries. I used to listen to the Oliver Harper ones, Jack White. And I was like, I'm going to listen to everything on this dude's channel. And I think I did, actually. So I did that. That's my life achievement. But hey, man, I love commentaries, and I love especially the horror ones where it's just like people talking about a horror movie for an hour doing like random ass horror voices. I'm on board. I have so much fun listening to those. It helps me stay in the Halloween mood all year long. Jack also says, I was playing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth while listening to the Quartering live stream earlier, and Viva Fry live streams as well. What do you listen to us on, Jack? Your phone, your computer? I'll put a live stream on my TV just because I can. Let's check in with the chat. Let's see. We got, I wish they'd re-release the Spider-Man animated series again on DVD and Blu-ray. The prices are insane. Toronto John, I happened to pick up that set in high school. I had a fast food cashier's job. So, I was making $6.25 an hour back in 2004, thinking it was okay.
Oh.
But you know what? I had a car. I paid my own insurance. I was that guy. But I had fun.
Yeah, I did the same thing back in, I didn't get my first car until 2006 was when I got my license, because I waited until I was 18.
So did I, but I had to work earlier than that.
I got my car.
Oh yeah, I was actually a freaking paper boy. 12, 13, 14, maybe 15 as well. Can't remember. Been a long time. I've been working a while.
Mm-hmm. Me too. Jack, how far are you into Final Fantasy as well? I got to get into a game. I've been playing this. If I tell you the stuff I play when I have my free time, you'd laugh. It's like the Crash Bandicoot remaster. I'm working on. I almost
Nothing wrong with that.
Bandicoot. Yeah, I had fun with that. What else? Oh no, somebody broke their foot on the way home from Alien Romulus. Well, Pacer Shark, we're wishing you well here, man.
Ooh. Broke your foot on the way home. How'd you do that? Were you stepping on the gas that hard to get away from the theater? Movie scare you that much? Damn.
Bro, if you would have seen some of the one scene with the engineer human alien hybrid thing, you too would have left quickly. It was so gross. And I never get uncomfortable in these movies, man. Like, that's not me.
I'm you know what? I need to see when the current local showings are in my
you do. Like, I would recommend it. I'm not going to say, oh, you gotta go out, right this second or see it in the biggest theater.
Does it have an IMAX screen is my question. So I always try to see stuff in IMAX if I can.
Let's see. I love classic Spidey. Spidey has so much sass, unlike Toby. Yeah and no. You got to take into the account the context. Like, Spider-Man in those movies makes a bunch of jokes, but we're watching him in a movie where the narrative style is different. He can do a couple jokes from scene to scene to scene, but if he kept doing it in movies, he'd come off as Deadpool, and he's not Deadpool. He's a much more balanced character because there's tons of issues where there are no jokes. I don't think there's a single Deadpool issue where there aren't any jokes. Well, hello, Sharon. Welcome in. I'm glad you've been watching us on TV, but we're happy to have you here tonight. Hopefully you're having a good time. I've seen you been chatting us for quite a while. Thank you for joining. John Thomas, thank you again for your very generous super chat. John, just type into the chat 1 for yes, 2 for no. Would you like a Steiner math? You sent in so many messages. It's a Steiner math. So if you'd like it, my friend, I'd love to press it for you. Jack says, script, do you remember Chappie? Hugh Jackman played the villain. Good movie about robot cops in South Africa. Horribly mismarketed. One robot becomes self-aware.
Oh, yeah. That's a Neil Blomkamp film.
Yep, I remember that one.
I think I dug it to a degree. I have a problem with Dave Patel as an actor. I think he's a good-looking guy. He just picks the wrong roles for his skill set, in my opinion. So it's hard for me to enjoy his performances in a bunch of things. I think he needs better representation and a better taste because he's been doing roles. I'm not. When I see him, I'm like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And like I saw him in Monkey Man. He wasn't.
I wanted to see that.
He was Gawain in Green Knight. That was horrible. Yeah. He's got to find his thing. I mean, I remember seeing him in The Newsroom, and he was really intolerable in that. and I liked The Newsroom because it was a funny commentary on politics between 2012 and 2014. Or 2016, sorry. 2012 and 2016.
I just know him from a couple things. Isn't he Slumdog Millionaire, right?
Is he Slumdog Millionaire? Yes, yeah, he's the older version of the guy in Slumdog Millionaire. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really get into that movie when everybody else did. I'm not really like super like a hipster about stuff, but when there's some kind of like feel-goody movie out like The Blind Side, I tend not to watch that. People are like, you gotta watch it, it's so heartwarming. I'm like, that's not something I'm not trying to evoke Seventh Heaven vibes when I watch a movie. Sometimes I want to leave shocked or at the edge of my seat, or at least entertained. That's what I want. But script, I saw Chappie. It wasn't as good as District 9. That's all I can say.
Yeah, but I mean, I appreciated what Chappie was trying to do. Because Neil Blomkamp has potential, and every time he gets kind of shafted, it seems.
Also, too, I was reading our chat, and our friend John Thomas did type in 1. So, John, here you go.
They say all men are created equal, but you look at me and you look at Small Joe, and you can see that statement is not true. See, normally if you go one-on-one with another wrestler, you got a 50-50 chance of winning. But I'm a genetic freak, and I'm not normal. So you got a 25% at best at beating me. And then you add Kurt Angle to the mix, your chances of winning drastically go down. See, the 3-way at sacrifice you got a 33 and a third chance of winning. But I got a 66 and 2/3 chance of winning because Kurt Angle knows he can't beat me and he's not even going to try. So Samoa Joe, you take your 33 and a third chance minus my 25% chance and you got an 8 and a third chance of winning at Sacrifice. But then you take my 75% chance of winning if we used to go one-on-one and then add 66 and 2/3%. I got 141 and 2/3 chance of winning at Sacrifice. See, Joe, the numbers don't lie, and they spell disaster for you at Sacrifice.
John,
It only makes
thanks very
sense.
much. I love Scott Steiner so much. His nephew's a hell of a wrestler too. His name is Braun Breaker. He's talented.
Good name.
Jack White says, I listen to all of you on my iPad Pro with a pair of wireless Bose headphones with one of those cups in one ear and off the other. And some game recommendations. The Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection, the Final Fantasy Remake games, and the Persona games are worth playing. Andrew, I've heard you like Persona, right?
I am a bit of a Persona nut. Yes. In fact, all of my social media banners and profile pictures are Persona 5 themed specifically. I'm a longtime fan of the franchise, but I'm also a big fan of Mega Man Battle Network, and I like the Final Fantasy remakes as well.
I've only played the original or Mega Man X games. I've never touched a Battle Network game.
Mega Man Classic, I respect. I like Mega Man X a lot more. Battle Network is more of a turn-based kind of RPG style. And so it's probably one of the reasons why I like it a lot more, but I also really like the character designs a lot more, and aesthetics are important to me when it comes to video games because it is a visual medium in part. So,
dude,
I like all the redesigned versions of the different characters.
What I would love is for them to do like they did with Street Fighter HD Remix, where they did like a hand-drawn remaster of the game. I'd love that for Mega Man X. Give me that.
That would be pretty cool. That would be pretty
Jack,
cool.
I took a screenshot of your game recommendations. I'm pretty much anything that's going to be on Game Pass, I'll give it a shot. And now that I got a fiber connection here, my games download instantly. So
yeah, fiber now. You went from having really bad internet to having better internet than me, and I have 1 gig download speeds.
I don't currently have 1 gig download speeds, but what I do have is the wired connection, and I'm happy. Any plans for Black Myth? You know, Sharon and everyone else watching, I'll tell you guys this. If you guys help us get more views on Twitch, we'll make Twitch a thing. Dion was trying to earlier, but life and his job and his family and stuff kind of took over and then, fell by the wayside. But we do have it. We would love to get monetized on Twitch. If there's something on Xbox or PC that you'd watch me play, I'll play it. We'll make a time of the week and we'll stream it. And if it starts gaining traction, we'll do it a couple nights a week. I'm down for that kind of stuff. We can have fun. I've always wanted to do one with Grand Theft Auto where it's insanity. You just watch me blow up stuff in direct.
Dude, a stream of you and the rest of the Thursday night guys streaming GTA 5 online and just getting up to a bunch of bullshit would probably be really hysterical and well received.
Well, I will talk to the guys about getting involved then because I have GTA 4, but I don't think the other guys do. I think maybe Nick does.
I would encourage looking into it at the very least because I think y'all would have a ton of fun, as would the audience.
I did too. We would talk so much shit to each other.
That's what friends are for.
And then they'd be infighting.
Yeah, if you're not talking shit to each other, are you really friends? I mean,
yeah, it's a good question, man. I ask myself that frequently. Well, it looks like at least Sharon's interested in the Twitch stream, so folks,
do it.
Keep watching some stuff. Stuff I won't Twitch stream. I won't Twitch stream. Okay, I gotta think. Conker's Bad Fur Day because I don't like that game, but
Oh, it's a funny game though. It's a tricky game to do, but it's a funny game.
The game is funny, and it's still hysterical to this day to me that they released that on the N64.
Mm-hmm.
I rented it on the N64. It was at Blockbuster, and I
And
just
now
didn't
to
know what to make
wander
of it.
aimlessly.
Now I want to play it again just to see how wrong I am. What's a game that you used to not like and now you're like, oh, I'm glad I've given it another shot.
I think the very first time I played the original Mass Effect on the Xbox 360, I wasn't a fan, but then I went back to it a couple years later, and I completely fell in love with the franchise. So I don't know what it was, but that snapshot in time, the gameplay just wasn't for me. But then I went back a couple of years after that and wound up becoming a mega fan.
I don't think I've got one of those because, because I probably forgot what the game was and then couldn't, and it would have been for the classic Nintendo too, because all the PC games I still have and play, and even like I have the original Star Wars Rebel Alliance 1 and 2 games on CD.
Oh wow!
And I loved playing those games as a kid, and I still every once in a while I'll pop it in and play it, and yeah, I mean, there's a lot of hand holding that game does for you because you don't have a whole lot of agency, but it's still fun for what it was. It's an early 90s game.
You're going to laugh. A game that I was late to the party on because I didn't like it at first was Halo. Now that's just one.
I could never get into Halo. Every time I played it, I'm like wondering, why do these guys, these Space Marines, move so slow and sluggish?
Oh, I think they move super fast and like can jump 30 feet in the air.
I was playing the original Xbox, and I was on a planet in multiplayer with some friends, and it took me 10 minutes to regroup with the rest of the team because the guy moved so slow. And I'm like, is there a way to move faster? Is there a boost? Is there anything? It's like, no, you just got to go. And, I looked at the instructions, and yep, I was doing everything right. And it took a long time to regroup with everybody. And then, yeah, I was like, no, I'm used to like real games like Halo. Or not real games like Halo. I'm used to real games like Quake and Doom and, Dark Forces and things where
Halo is way slowed down compared to Quake.
Yeah.
And Doom.
Like I'm not impressed by
it moves at about a third of the speed as games like that. Halo didn't speed up until Halo 4, which actually a lot of Halo fans complained about because it all of a sudden felt like just a Halo skinned Call of Duty.
Yep, because it had what did it add? The run feature had that's what threw it off. It made it feel weird.
Yeah.
I liked Halo 4 enough that I played it with my friends regularly, but I never touched the story once.
The campaign was better than 5's. The gameplay itself was inferior to 5's because 5 had a trash campaign, but mechanically it found a really nice balance between Halo and other shooters that were out there that were a little more fast-paced, but not like Doom level fast-paced. Halo 5 mechanically was fantastic, but the campaign, man, I wanted to sell my Xbox One after I finished that campaign. I was like, why?
Well, the joke's on you. You should have never bought an Xbox One.
Well, I got the Halo 5 edition Xbox One, actually.
That was the only Xbox I passed on, but now I'm going back and playing all the games I missed, and that's why I like Series X, because people are like, oh, there's no next-gen experience. I'm like, I get that, and you're right. But I missed out on last gen, so I'm just playing catch-up, and there's tons of shit to play, so I like it. Gears of War is the best, Sal. I love Gears of War, but I never didn't like Gears of War. When it first dropped in 2006, I was working in high school, so when I got my very first tax return in 2007, I bought a wireless router, and I bought Gears of War, the deluxe edition. And that was all the money I had for my tax return. But I played Gears Online. I ran it was 50 feet, but I ran an Ethernet wire from my router into my living room for my Xbox 360. And I would sit and play Gears of War for hours and hours. I still play it every once in a while. I haven't really lost my touch. I played it way too much in college. That and Rock Band. Do love gaming. It just depends on the game. Jack White has some more game recommendations. Thank you, Jack, for your super chat. Jack says some more game recommendations. Evil West, the Nino Kuni games, Darksiders, the Digimon Cyber Sleuth games. Let me take a picture of that. I've heard of this Nino Kuni.
Nino Kuni is a JRPG franchise. There are two of them that are, at least the art direction is done by the Hayao Miyazaki Studio Ghibli guys.
Oh,
so like Howl's Moving Castle, Spirited Away, Princess Mononoke, all of that. So visually, it looks like it came straight from that studio. Beautiful games, and the gameplay and the story are very well done. Very well done.
I'm gonna have to check it out. Jack also says, and the System Shock remake. What is that on? Why do I?
That's recent, isn't that?
I think so.
I think that's only within the last year or two. I want to say they did that. I didn't look too much into it, but I do remember them saying that that's something they were working on. I feel like that was like a year ago or so.
Oh, our friend in the chat. I'm tired. I'm gonna just say Snozexiri. Sorry, he says it came out from last year, or year before. 2 years ago, says Kabuto.
Yeah, Mav, my good buddy Mav, who is wrong about 60% of the time, is correct in this instance.
Oh, okay. That's how statistics work.
It is when I'm giving my friends shit.
As you should. Believe me, I troll mine on the show. Well, guys, it is time for us to go. Folks, this has been a nice turnout tonight. Thank you for all the generous super chats. We are moving up in the world of entertainment, so thank you, guys. Yes, boo, Andrew. Yes.
This guy.
LGT97, what is up to me? Well, what is up to you? I'm doing well, man. We just had a fun show. I'm going to get some rest. I've been kind of up a lot late doing this stuff, so I'm going to need some rest, and I'm going to get back to it tomorrow. Folks, check out all of our shorts. YouTube tells me they want shorts, so now I've been clipping stuff, and it is all visual now. So I have been reinvesting into the channel to bring you guys some new visuals and some exciting stuff, and be on the lookout. I'm going to be going all over, and I only tuned for Jeff and script anyway.
It's okay. It's okay. My feelings aren't hurt.
They shouldn't.
I appreciate that.
I do too, right here.
I only tune in for Jeff and script anyway as well. So
yeah, I
only tune in for me and Jeff also.
Yeah.
I'm only here because I
unlike some people on YouTube, I'm not here just for the sound of my own voice.
You don't have to call me out that harshly, dude. All right.
It was not directed at you.
I know.
Totally me.
Oh man, I am really tired. Sharon, I'm glad you had a great time. It was great to interact with you. Glad you're watching us on a different platform besides your TV. Folks, thank you for watching. Do us a favor, share, hit copy, and that's it. That counts as a share. Help us get to 200K. Say it every day, WCBS, 200K. I do. But no, that is our goal. We are getting there by the end of the year. I write it down, making the videos all the time, spreading the word. Folks, if there's anywhere you want to see me, shoot me an email to info@worldclassbullshitters.com or tell the other channel, hey, you want Jeff from WCBS to show up? I'm like Johnny Wishbone. Say my name and poof, I appear. Xavier to God says, does Andrew have X-Pac heat? Oof. Do you have X-Pac heat? Do you know what X-Pac heat is?
Some weeks I do, I feel like.
Maybe. How does it feel to live with it?
It's all right. I'm okay. It doesn't
well, as
bother
long
me.
as you're okay with it.
Yeah, I'm okay with taking some heat. It's fine. It's better than apathy, right, Disney?
Yep, 100%.
You can't buy your way out of that. So, folks, thank you for having us this evening. We enjoyed hanging out with you guys. We enjoyed hanging out with each other. Jack White, thank you very much again. Check out the Rurouni Kenshin anime when you get a chance. The new one. Okay. Well, Jack, I take a screenshot. I still have my Crunchyroll, and I will give that a shot. What am I trying to watch right now? I don't know if I'm going to watch The Rings of Power. I'm joking. I don't think I'm going to watch The Rings of Power.
Don't do that. Don't do it. Don't do it.
No, but I will look into some Twitch stuff. And folks, be on the lookout. I'm not trying to do a cheap ploy. I'm still getting Woke Busters ready to, be printed and shipped and stuff to take care of everybody so you guys can follow all the updates. But I am excited to be working on Stealing Solo 2. I love doing comics. They are fun, and you are going to love this one. It is completely different than you can't comprehend what it actually is. And Script and Andrew, I'm not even going to tell you guys. Like I would always tell you stuff about Woke Busters behind the scenes.
Yeah.
No.
Oh.
You to know this one. This one's unique.
Oh,
and
fine.
it's not
I'm
too much of a surprise. Okay. Honestly makes me want to know even more.
Yeah, everyone's.
I guess that means I'm just going to have to back day one. Chat, you should do the same.
Absolutely.
I should, but hey, we're not doing anything until Woke Busters is all out the door. So just be on the lookout. I'm working diligently behind the scenes to bring you guys that book because our old pal Mark Hamill's been going a little bit off the deep end. And well, folks, the best way to deal with these things, let's just have a laugh. Let's just chuckle. Let's let good old Luke do his thing, and let's do ours.
If they're going to hand you the ammo to fire at with, then may as well utilize it.
It has just given me so much inspiration is what it's given me, and I love it. I can't wait to start drawing it. So, folks, thank you for watching. I'll be back next time with more. I'm going to go get some rest, so expect something probably later in the afternoon, maybe Thursday at the latest. But until then, folks, be smart, be safe, be cool, but always be excellent to each other.
You don't believe in the Force, do you?
I've seen a lot of strange stuff, but I've never seen anything to make me believe there's one all-powerful force controlling everything.